I'll call the Charlottesville regular business meeting to order, and we're going to read ourselves out of closed session.
I move that this council certify by a recorded vote that to the best of each council member's knowledge, only public business matters lawfully exempted from the open meeting requirements of the Virginia Freedom of Information Act and identified in the motion convening the closed session were heard, discussed, or considered in the closed session.
Is there a second?
Second.
Okay, can we vote? Okay, so we were in closed session making appointments of various boards and commissions, and so Max is playing double duty. Were you able to you were?
Yes.
You want me to read them? Okay. Boards and commission appointments. The Board of Architectural Review, Jennifer Lauer. Charlottesville Affordable Housing Fund Committee, S. Lisa Herndon. Community Policy Management Team, Barbara Station. Historic Resources Committee, Julie Basic, Matthew Morrill, Lucy Pola, Elizabeth Shalou. Human Rights Commission, Jason Whitehead. JABA Board of Directors, Elliot Weiss. MACA Board, Sarah Schauf. Minority Business Commission, Tira Farley and Conan Owen. PVCC Board, Leslie Fravel. Region 10 Board, Francesca Diggs, Richard Stott, Joe Sakos. Retirement Commission, Lindsay Eidson, William Newberry. Sister Cities Commission, Allison Brown, S. Lyndon Herndon, Edward Herring, and Sherry Stewart. Social Services Advisory Board, Avon Batten, Benjamin Dick, Omoira Nikiri. The Vendor Appeal Board, LaQuinn Gilmore, and Youth Council, Grant Patterson. I would move that we appoint all the folks I just read to the respective boards and commissions.
Is there a second?
Second.
Okay, can we vote? I want to thank everyone that applied for that, and we'll be in touch with them with further details. Before we begin our meetings, we want to have a moment of silence. Thank you all very much. Are there any announcements from counselors? I know we have two you had one from Alexander. Were you able to get that? Well, if not,
Yes, I have it pulled up.
Okay.
2025 My Help List award winners. Alexander's 10th annual My Help List contest winners have been selected. The contest is a thinking, reading, writing activity for students in Charlottesville and surrounding counties. Students in Charlottesville and surrounding counties, students share their thoughts on the importance of helping others and list 5 things they can or do to help someone. This year's winners are Zoe Halbert, 2nd grader at Jackson Via, Alexandra Kim, a 4th grader at Mountain View Elementary, Elijah Fernandez, 7th grader in Fluvanna County, Haley Gray, and a 9th grader in Albemarle High School. The winners will be awarded a $100 cash prize at a gathering on Thursday, May 8th, 2025 at 6 p.m. at York Place, the Charlottesville Media Center on the downtown mall. The winners, their guests, sponsors, and media are invited. Sponsors are Mr. Johnny Bates, Pat Nall, Attorney Bruce Maxa, Sheriff James Brown, J.F. Bell Funeral Home, Louis Tuna Johnson, and our partner, NBC 29.
Okay. Thank you. Thank Alexander again for always doing so much in the community, particularly to uplift the youth in the community. We have a proclamation, Public Works first.
We do. It is Public Works Week. Whereas public works professionals focus on infrastructure, facilities, solid waste, street maintenance, engineering, and traffic field operations and services to make Charlottesville's quality of life better for people to live, work, play, and visit. And whereas these infrastructure, facilities, and services could not be provided without the dedicated efforts of public works professionals who are engineers, managers, skilled trades, equipment operators, and employees at all levels of government, who are responsible for rebuilding, improving, and protecting public buildings and other structures and facilities essential for our community members. And whereas the Public Works Department maintains 160 miles of streets, 155 miles of sidewalks, over 1,500 ADA ramps, 75 traffic signals, 13,000 traffic signs, 70 buildings consisting of 1.6 million square feet, and 655 vehicles and pieces of equipment, and responded to 5 snow events clearing streets and 31 miles of sidewalk and trails. And whereas the Public Works Department is responsible for a $30 million operational budget, manages the engineering, project management, and construction to include $125 million for transportation projects and $260 million 5-year capital improvement program to include Charlottesville Middle School, Walker Pre-K Center, Bypass Fire Station, and the completion of the Belmont Bridge. And whereas it is in the public interest of Charlottesville to gain knowledge of and maintain an ongoing interest and understanding of the importance of public works programs in their respective communities. And whereas the year 2025 marks the 65th annual National Public Works Week sponsored by the American Public Works Association and the Canadian Public Works Association. Now, therefore, the Charlottesville City Council proclaims the week of May 18th through 24th, 2025 as Public Works Week in the city of Charlottesville, urging all community members to join in activities, events, and ceremonies designed to pay tribute to our public works professionals and to recognize the substantial contributions they make in advancing quality of life for all.
Thank you. Is someone here from Public Works?
Mayor Wade, Vice Mayor Pinkston, members of council, Deputy Director of Public Works Mike Goddard here. Just want to thank you for this proclamation. The City of Charlottesville is a wonderful and special place with high expectations, and we endeavor to meet those expectations every day. So thank you for this tip of the hat.
Thank you.
Thank you.
All right, I have a proclamation for Older Americans Month. Whereas May is recognized as Older Americans Month, a time for us to recognize and honor older adults in the city of Charlottesville and their immense influence on every facet of society. And whereas Charlottesville recognizes how, through their wealth of life experience and wisdom, older adults guide our younger generations and carry forward abundant cultural and historical knowledge. And whereas Charlottesville recognizes that older adults improve our community through intergenerational relationships, community service, civic engagement, many other activities. And whereas our community benefits when people of all ages, abilities, and backgrounds have the opportunity to participate and live independently. And whereas Charlottesville aims to ensure that older adults have the resources and support needed to stay involved in the community, reflecting our commitment to inclusivity and connectedness. Now, therefore, the Charlottesville City Council proclaims May 2025 to be Older Americans Month. We urge every resident to flip the script on aging, this year's theme, and transform how we talk about and perceive aging, celebrating older adults' profound impact on our local community, empowered by social connections, health resources, and support for older adults. Signed and dated this 19th day of May 2025, Juan Diego Wade, Mayor.
Thank you.
Mayor, on behalf of Jefferson Area Board for Aging and the seniors in this community and surrounding areas, we very much appreciate the support that the city gives us, as well as the recognition here. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much, sir. I serve on the JABA board, so we had a meeting today, so thank you. So we're now at the time for community matters, and 6 people have pre-registered, leaving 10 slots open to speak at this time. And the first speaker we have is Louis Huchin. I'm sorry if I didn't pronounce your name correctly.
Allow me to introduce myself. My name is Louis Hushin, and I am a student at Community Lab School. The problem that I'm here to explain is that Charlottesville isn't a very bikeable city. This issue is personal to me and my family because we had a family member pass due to a bike accident in 2020. Other families should not experience what my family went through. According to People for Bikes, Charlottesville has a 26 out of 100 bike rating, which shows how inaccessible it is to bike in Charlottesville. Another way Charlottesville isn't a very bikeable city is the lack of bike infrastructure. The Belmont Bridge being redone with curbed bike lanes is beneficial because it helps to keep the road and the bike lanes separate. This is what the council should be doing, as well as increasing the number of bike lanes around Charlottesville. Another way to reduce crashes is to add curbs to the bike lanes to help separate them from traffic. This would make bike lanes safer. Between 2019 and 2023, in Charlottesville, there were a total of 36 crashes involving cyclists, one of which was a fatal crash. In conclusion, I respectfully request from the council an increased amount of funding for cyclists and pedestrian and infrastructure. Thank you for your time.
Thank you very much, and we're sorry for your loss.
Yeah.
Thank you. The next speaker is Jill McClinley.
Good evening. My name is Jill McKinley. I've lived in Charlottesville since 2011, and I've been a Charlottesville parent since 2017. For the past 2 years, I've also served as the PTO chair of Johnston Elementary. I'm here tonight representing parents, educators, and neighbors who care deeply about our public schools and who believe we're at a crossroads. When we learned about the former Federal Executive Institute property would be transferred to UVA, many of us felt a mix of shock and disappointment. Not because UVA is expanding, we understand that, but because it felt like another moment where a public resource that could have supported public needs, but didn't. But we also know that UVA isn't giving the space back. So now we're asking, what can they give forward? This is a moment to reimagine the relationship between UVA and Charlottesville City Schools. It's an opportunity for UVA not just to be a good partner, but a great one. Over the past week, a group of parents from across city PTOs have come together to draft a proposal for a long-term partnership between UVA and CCS. This plan is inspired by successful models in other cities, such as Penn's investment in Philadelphia schools and UCS's investment in Los Angeles County schools, or Los Angeles City Schools. The proposal lays out a 10-year vision with sustained investment in 4 areas: supporting teacher retention and housing, expanding after-school and enrichment programming, improving digital access and academic achievements, and strengthening the infrastructure of our schools, especially for students with special needs. We're preparing to bring this plan to Dr. Gurley and the school board because any real partnership has to start with the district's leadership and vision. But we're here tonight because we also believe the city plays an essential role in this conversation. UVA listens when the city speaks, and we believe a unified message from parents, the school division, and from city leadership can help bring UVA to the table. UVA's growth has brought enormous benefits to the region, but it has also driven up the cost of living, especially for public servants like teachers and school staff. These systems may be separate, but they're deeply connected. Charlottesville teachers earn between $56,000 and $78,000 per year. Many of the staff who support our students every day earn far below what's needed to afford housing in the city. The median home price here is over $500,000. These numbers are unsustainable, and they're unsustainable just minutes from a university that's deeply invested in the city of the future, or the future of the city. Also the city of the future. We're asking for your support in elevating this conversation, because when educators can't afford to live in the community they serve and students still lack reliable access to technology and opportunity, we can't pretend these systems are disconnected. We're not here to point fingers. We're here to build something better together. In the coming days, we'll be sharing a full proposal with district leadership. We would also welcome the city's review and support as we work to turn this from an idea to a shared commitment. Because the stronger our schools are, the stronger the city becomes. And as President Ryan himself has said, the stronger Charlottesville is, the stronger UVA will be. Thank you.
Thank you very much. The next speaker is Mr. Hall.
Yes, I'm John Hall from Fry Spring. You've understood the 7 types of plastics I want to recycle for the homeless, providing them jobs. I think Vice Mayor Princeton asked me to further elaborate, so he might be able to better understand it. We might be able to add metal, glass, and composting into the mix. We mainly have these triangles that we match with roll-off containers the same triangles. And we have the homeless people. We get them there through the Charlottesville area transit buses and give them, well, $21.50 I said, but make it $25. This would be funded through the budgeting of the Charlottesville consent agenda, on the city council consent agenda, and be able to have something that would benefit all the homeless people, giving them something to do, getting them to the job, having the churches to cater the event. I was thinking the recycling trucks that come around the neighborhoods. You get one or two to start. I understand there's like 100 homeless people that we know of in the Charlottesville area. Get them to the area, and that we have the roll-off containers, and be able to pay them when we get them there, $25, and have supervision at $50 an hour, making sure that the recycled plastics go into the right roll-off containers, and all the residual. We'd be creating a new market, essentially, being able to take care of our waste at the same time as we take care of our homeless problem. It's a win-win situation that I see, and it's well thought out. This time, I've thought about this for a long, long time, and I really believe that if we were to vote on this and get the Charlottesville Investment Collaborative people behind this, so that I can't do it all myself, have the human resources set up for the program. Thank you so much for listening.
Thank you, Mr. Hall. Next speaker is Kate.
I cede my time to Mr. Foley and Mr. Hicks.
Good morning, City Council. Good evening, City Council. Thank you for letting me speak. My name is Earl Hicks. I live in Charlottesville, Virginia. I am speaking for the People's Coalition. We ask you to vote no on funding a bigger jail on June the 2nd. This is not just about money. It's about doing what is right. Building a bigger jail won't fix the unfair way black people are treated in the legal system. A study showed this problem years ago. It's still happening now. It also costs too much. The price is already rising. And the city is losing money from the federal government. That means less money for schools, housing, businesses, and people with mental illness don't need to be locked in cells. They need care in the community, not in jail. Let's use our money for things that help people, like housing, mental health care, schools, not more jail cells. Please vote no on the jail expansion. Thank you.
Thank you very much.
So I'm going to tell a quick story. I do want to give you this. I'm not going to read this. I have the honor to go to the Blue Ridge Jail to talk to youth. And what I talked to them about is organizing. Now, I'm talking about this campaign real quick. And I told them it's going to be like $27 million for $1 million a year. And I looked to the young man beside me, who's a young black man who's in there, and I asked him, what would you do with $1 million? You know what he said? Build bigger parks. And I almost fell out my chair. And so what I want to say is, I don't know if y'all talk to people like that who's incarcerated, the young people, but I told them what they're doing is building a jail for y'all. With that said, these are the organizations who signed on to our petition. The City of Promise, Congregate Charlottesville, the Senate of Enslaved Communities of UVA, Letting Hand, Liberal Charlottesville, not me, I believe, People's Coalition, Prolific Running Crew, Sojourners Unit Church, Seattle Club, United Campus Workers of Virginia, and the Women's Initiative. And I'm going to just hand all this to you all, and I really hope that that story pull on your heartstring, because young people do understand that they need help, not another jail.
Thank you. Thank you. The next speaker is Ronald Ignatz. Hope I got your last name correct.
Thank you. Ron Ignatz, 1420 Villa Verde Lane. I attended the council meeting on May 5th because of my concern about the ICE action at the Albemarle County Jail, or County Courthouse. But I listened with interest to the young man who spoke about Peregrine, a database subscription service being considered for the Charlottesville Police Department. Doing some research since then, I found that Peregrine Technologies was founded and backed by former Palantir technology executives. Palantir's website leads with, quote, AI-powered automation for every decision. Palantir is known for its data analytics software, and it's used by government agencies supporting law enforcement efforts such as ICE. Peter Thiel is a board member of Palantir. As a spin-off, Peregrine is known as a member of the Palantir Mafia. That's from their website. Sequoia Venture Capital invested $190 million in Peregrine. Sequoia dedicates its resources to artificial intelligence. Elon Musk is a founder of that organization. The public must know what data is being collected and what can happen to it. According to the Peregrine website, this information includes a profile and contact information, including first and last name, email, phone numbers, web page interactions, IP address-based local information, resumes, job information, and a LinkedIn profile. From the Peregrine website, they say all personal data collected may be transferred to a third party if Peregrine upgrades or undergoes a merger, acquisition, bankruptcy, or other transaction in which a third party assumes either whole or partial control. Peregrine may create aggregated, de-identified, and anonymized data from the personal data they collect. They may use such aggregated data and share it with third parties for other business purposes. Data may also be shared to fulfill Peregrine's legal obligations under applicable law, regulation, court orders, or other legal processes, such as preventing, detecting, and investigating security incidents and potentially illegal or prohibited activities. Chief Coaches assured us that the police department data would only be accessed via a warrant or court order. What if that warrant is issued by ICE or Peregrine? using this
you.
database appears to be a very dangerous and unacceptable venture. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. The next speaker is Stephen Christensen.
Good evening.
Good evening.
Stephen Christensen, president of Hillwood Funeral Home, and I want to thank you all for the opportunity to speak this evening. I'm here to request your consideration of the proposal before you later this evening for a parking agreement to allow Hillwood Funeral Service to enter a revocable parking agreement with the city for the designated parking spaces along First Street during service times. Our funeral home, which has been a member of the Charlottesville community for 118 years, plays a vital role in our community, providing essential support and dignity to families during their most difficult days. In the past, we've relied on the courtesy and respect of the public to honor a request that certain parking along First Street be reserved for the families and funeral vehicles needed for services. This was communicated using small sandwich board style signs that were and continue to be the funeral company supply standard. But regrettably, in today's fast-paced world, these signs are increasingly overlooked or simply ignored. We understand that street parking here in downtown Charlottesville is extremely limited and creates an obstacle for the owners, employees, and prospective patrons of the businesses in the downtown community. But we, aside from our obvious bias, would respectfully submit that there is a public service in what we do. Honoring and celebrating the lives of community members who have passed is why our business exists. Funeral homes are unlike many other businesses in that when we as funeral service professionals do everything right, the vast majority of what we have done goes unnoticed. And that's how it should be. But the devil, they say, is in the details. And as it happens, one of those details relates to not only having an adequate number of parking spaces, but also the location of those spaces in relation to our chapel doors. Ensuring that as we exit our chapel, we can directly access our hearse while also arranging vehicles for procession when relevant, and at other times simply having sufficient convenient parking, as guests to funerals are often not familiar with other parking options in downtown Charlottesville. This helps us maintain the respectful and efficient conduct of ceremonies, ultimately benefiting the families and the community as a whole. While we do ourselves have challenges with adequate parking during services, we are also blessed to operate a parking lot when there are not services, is larger than our needs require. It has been our privilege to offer public parking in many of the spaces on our lot during non-service days, free of charge for many years. Since beginning this conversation with the city several years ago, we have invested in easier to understand signage to help facilitate public awareness of this resource. While we recognize that our request, if approved, may at times cause some small level of inconvenience, we hope that the greater number of spaces we provide and a greater frequency reflect our commitment to serving the public good while we practice our profession. In conclusion, I encourage the council to approve this measure while we ensure that we have the parking resources we need to serve city residents during their moments of need. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. We have opportunity for 10 other speakers. If anyone like to speak? Yes, sir.
Hello, Movanda Sample, 608 Cabell Avenue. When I last spoke to you, I had concerns over the city's possible adoption of Peregrine Technologies. I was extremely frustrated by a lack of transparency in what exactly they offer and was driven to some amount of speculation and some amount of guilt by association. I appreciate that you reached out to them. Their statement provided some much needed information, and while it assuaged some of my worst fears, I remain trepidatious. Either way, I wanted to clarify that I really thank you for listening to my concerns and taking them seriously. It's better than I've grown to expect from our House representative. The number one thing that makes me less concerned is that they claim that they are not training any AI with the data that we give them. They also continuously repeat that they lay no claim of rights or ownership to the data. I'm no lawyer. Even if I were, the contract they're citing isn't public. But if that sentence means how it reads in plain English, this is very encouraging. They also make clear that my reading about a claim around automation of police reports was uncharitable. They aren't generating police reports, just crime trends reports, which is something anyone could automate with Excel with just some basic database management, nothing sinister there. All around, if their statements are to be believed, I think it's fair to say that my previous statement went a bit too far and was driven certainly by some amount of, although I think reasonable, paranoia. That said, there are still valid concerns. Number one, they absolutely still have our data on their servers. They made this clear. They host a copy of the data on AWS servers accessible accessible to them, which means the nightmare scenario of a hostile federal government demanding access remains on the table. There's simply no way that they can avoid complying with FBI orders. Number two, this is an extremely powerful tool to hand to officers. It lets them see basically everything police know about a person with just a few taps on their device, including known associates, any previous history of interaction with police, etc. It just seems like a lot. And then finally, number three, privacy of the officers themselves. The previous speaker also spoke about this. This is something I didn't flag until after the last meeting, but they collect a ton of data on anyone that is using their software. In particular, they will collect from every officer using the app what websites they visit, geolocation data, job title, job history, and even go so far as to crawl the officer's LinkedIn account. They also retain the right to share that data, for some purposes aggregated and de-identified, and for other purposes not. All around, I'm less outraged now and more confused. It seems like all Seville Police actually wants is a better system management and more easily accessible crime trends. This seems like an extremely overpowered tool for that. I guarantee you can just hire some in-house information scientists to do this for cheaper, and they won't build an app that tracks your cops while they're at it. That said, I want to be clear, if everything in their responses to your questions is truthful, this company is far less sinister than I had concluded, and I don't think I would be a reasonable person if I didn't fess up to that. Personally, I still feel like a no on this. I just can't bring myself to trust them. Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Mary.
My name's Richard Allen. I live in Charlottesville. And I think something's confusing me here in town right now. And I want to thank you for listening to my confusion and connecting your heart to what I'm about to say. I've been doing my best across the last year and a half to follow this issue about the new jail. And as best I can distill it, it works like this. We're overdue to make some changes, renovations, and needed structural corrections there at our regional jail. I have been in the regional jail, and I appreciate its services. And I know that we need a jail, just like we need police. We need to have these structures and consequences around us. But at the same time, $49 million, I have been in construction myself, certainly not cinder block construction, and it still seems to me like a very, very large amount of money to spend on the things that I hear the money is detailed for. What concerns me even more, and I have a sign here today saying I'm deeply concerned about the amortization and basically mortgage basing manner in which you're going to handle the loan, such that there's going to be $23 million of carrying charges in terms of interest that the banks who are funding this proposed idea will put in their own pockets. It feels to me like something is wrong in the common sense department of the citizenry and you remarkable and dedicated leaders of our community if you do not see the fallacies in pouring money into more architecture that's going to consequence people at the very same time when our Commonwealth attorneys are using their common sense to pull people out of jails, put some kind of a device on their ankle and confine them at home, while I believe also providing them with some services that will keep them out of jail. Surely, you could consider revisiting this whole issue and dropping that $49 million investment down by half. Let's say $23 million, $24.5 million, and do the absolutely crucial things that the jail needs without. There's a president who's been talking an awful lot about waste. I don't mean to suggest that this city council is intentionally engaging in waste. I certainly don't believe that, but I believe that the project itself is overblown. Please vote no on this project.
Thank you. Mr. Marietta?
Good evening, everybody. My name is Mario. I live in Crescent Hall, and this is my sixth time visit this place. I did not get any help. I live on sixth floor. I have neighbor on fifth. He's drug dealer and he is heavily drug user, especially on weekend 24 hours. It made me very sick. It come through to vent because when it's cold, he turn the heater. It makes me sick. I hospitalized 7 times. This is all the report from Martha Jefferson, not UVA. And I called police. Police went by his door. He doesn't open the door. And sometimes, 1 time, 2 times, he opened the door. The policeman couldn't arrest him, didn't arrest him. He told me, those pig, if they cannot catch me, they are dumb. And anyhow, he threatened me to kill me. He said he was in the gang, he has gun. They took his gun away. He's gonna get a new gun. He threatened me. He said he's gonna beheaded me. I didn't know what is beheaded mean. And I asked some American people. They told me it mean he chopped my head. This one was Saturday before Easter. And anyhow, I called many times Chief Picashes and left message with his secretary. He never replied to me. And I gave him my complaint. He told me, send it to me. I sent it to him 6 months ago. He never replied to me. He said, I saw him. He said he gave it to his assistant. I didn't ask him who is his assistant. Anyhow, I was first year medical school. I met President Obama, and he wrote me a letter, as you see his signature, and I couldn't find his picture. And I was going to meet President Obama and President Biden. He was sick. After that, he has to go to Ukraine. I called governor office.
Okay,
his secretary told me he has to write a lot of checks, and he has a meeting. He's gonna reply to me anyhow. This drug is very dangerous.
Thank you.
It is very powerful. Even it burned all over my body, just 2 minutes.
No, you've
1
had
minute.
3 is time. I'm
Yeah,
sorry.
1 minute.
No, I'm sorry, sir.
Because nobody
we
cared.
we hear you.
Nobody cared. The last time I was in hospital, like a week ago.
We'll have Mr. Sales to follow up with you.
Yeah, Mr. Sales doesn't do anything. He threatened me with the butcher knife. He slashed my tire. Officer Velasquez, Officer Kirby took a picture. The only thing I wanted to talk to Chief Picashes.
He's right behind you, waiting to talk.
Okay, thank you so much.
Thank you. We have opportunity for 3 or 4 other, 5 other speakers. Anyone else want to speak now? Don?
Good evening.
Good evening.
Don Gather, city resident. I rise in support of the recommendation from the People's Coalition. Imagine, if you will, what this community could do with $49 million and how far that would go to assist in helping to house and feed the homeless. I'm certain that the educational system could certainly use those additional funds. Be better put towards mental health resources. Simply hold on to the money, not knowing what that idiotic dude in D.C. is going to do next. There's no real rehabilitation that's going on in that jail. It's warehousing. We really need to do something to help, and expanding a facility that's already not being 100% utilized is not the answer. It's sad that we have to deal with these sort of things, but the word tells me that what you've done to the least of these, yet you've done to me. So it's important that we do what's right and not what's popular. Sadly, I know that you all probably pretty much have already made up your minds about this, and this is now a minute and a half of my life that I'll never get back. But you all have the power. You have been empaneled with the power to do something right. And warehousing or continuing to warehouse people is not the answer. That's not the solution. Sit down and come up with some viable solutions that are alternatives to locking someone up and then doing nothing else for them. Please.
Thank you. Anyone else like to speak? Okay. Oh.
Hi, good evening. My name is Kelly Hart. I live in El Moreno County. I come down to the city an awful lot. And I want to thank this man here for his research. I came down to say I don't want to live in a police state. I don't want Orwellian type surveillance. So think carefully about that plan. I don't want my personal information out there. I don't like that idea at all. And I also want to support the idea of no more jails. I'm a retired teacher. I'm for education, I'm for parks, I'm for mental health services, I'm for community. Thank you.
Thank you. Mm-hmm. And Kate, you can, no, Kate, after him, I'm sorry. You're next.
Hi, I am Andrew Shelton. I'm a county resident, just barely, but I've lived in the city my whole life and spend most of my free time here. I'm here to speak about Peregrine, but I'm actually going to start by talking about Flock, even though I fully understand they're two different companies. I was up here speaking when y'all were getting ready to take your Flock vote and cautioned that I didn't think that you could trust those companies, that their basic premise is to gather as much data as possible and try and shape it into a marketable product. And I have those concerns about Peregrine, and the reason I'm tying them into Flock is, I don't know, 4 or 5 days after the last city council meeting where this issue first came up, 404 Media dropped an article that was based on some leaked documents retrieved from Flock about a new product they're working on that is intended to bring all of the data that they can access, social media, license plate readers being obviously their primary thing, into a searchable tool called Nova that would be something where you could essentially do direct tracking of individuals, not just vehicles. The reason that I think this is relevant to the Peregrine issue is that they list Peregrine as their #1 competitor. I fundamentally don't believe that you can rely on these companies with this type of business model to give you an accurate representation of what they're going to do with their data, our data, that they then have access to and are able to, ship it off into the cloud, at which point we have no control over that. I think this is something that is, it's a very clear-cut thing to me. I understand y'all may or may not agree on that, but I think that we can look back at the cautions that people gave y'all about Flock and say, yeah, those were justified. And so please consider that that may be the case here. And that's not even getting into the issues with our current federal government and the fact that if you centralize all of that information in one place, it makes it very easy for somebody to, get a federal warrant and go hunting down individuals, as we've seen with ICE raids in our community. I think last meeting, Councilor Snook, you said something along the lines of your suspicion of centralized databases has increased greatly in the last 4 months, and I really appreciate that. I understand that every single one of y'all up there cares genuinely about our immigrant neighbors in this community, many of whom are facing threats of having their previous legal status revoked for arbitrary reasons. Please do not enable farther digging down into the level where they will be put at greater risk. Please. Thank you very much.
So, Kate, I'm sorry, but you already exceeded your time. I'm going to see, we have to make sure that no one else wants to speak. So, anyone else would like, we have opportunity for 3 more speakers. Anyone? Okay. I'm sorry. Anyone else like to speak?
Good evening. My name is Rosia Parker. We're the people for the people. We need to invest in the village and not the jails. These issues, mental health, affordable housing, food insecurity, health care, education affects myself as well as others in the community. Our daily life will be changed struggling to live. I stand in solidarity with the People's Coalition, fighting against a system that is unjust as the jail chooses to host the unhoused Black and brown citizens due to minority disparity, as well as others with mental health, substance abuse. Some of our citizens commit crimes just to have somewhere to stay, sleep, and eat. There should be more services in place to help the community instead of the jail expansion funding. Traumatization to youth going into adulthood. Our youth needs more diverse services such as proper probation, better intake services, counselors, school to prison pipeline, rendering more services to the youth in the school system. Money should be put into programs that may be cut due to federal changes in the near future. Taxpayers' money is being used to create this expansion of the jail funding. As a taxpayer, I am very upset my money being used as a taxpayer to harm my fellow citizens, putting them in cages. So I ask you to vote no on the expansion funding because it could be well utilized in the community for other things such as what People's Coalition and myself have spoken on. Thank you.
Thank you. Anyone else like to speak? We have the opportunity for 2 more slots. Kate?
So the People's Coalition was asked by Reverend Brenda Brown Grooms, the pastor at New Beginnings Christian Community, to read this to you. Dear Mayor Wade, Councilmember Pinkston, Councilmember Oshrin, Councilmember Payne, and Councilmember Snook, as the Reverend Dr. William Barber II, who's repairs of the breach and now leader of the Moral Mondays, responded to the Trump administration's immoral budget policy, shouts from the steps of the Capitol, budgets are moral documents. They reveal whether or not our leaders, local, state, and federal, care about the welfare of the people they are entrusted to serve. This jail expansion proposal is a tone-deaf response to the documented concerns this community has repeatedly laid out to the City of Charlottesville and the County of Albemarle through the Manager's Community Budget Forum. We need more affordable housing, better public transportation, a plan that forwards economic growth and educational development for our children, and mental health protocols that do not rely on the police. Rather, they rely on mental health local community mental health services. We do not need an expanded jail that sucks up our fiscal budget to build more cages for people who need care that jails do not and cannot provide. We mean to make you hear us. This community doesn't need more cages, it needs is more care. The budget vote you all vote on will show clearly whether or not you are concerned about the real people who have told you again and again which issues are a priority to them. Please don't fail us again.
Thank you very much. Opportunity for one more person to speak? We have an opportunity at the end. Okay? Oh,
And Mayor, if I could just to address the comment about the Federal Executive Institute, because I think it warrants mentioning. Obviously, the city had gotten it, it was rescinded. Both the city and city schools had given a formal request to the university not to pursue that application, but did. It was rescinded. Whether the Board of Visitors was involved in that, we don't have direct information of, but I think it's worth acknowledging the impact of that, of tens of millions of dollars of impact on the school system, as well as now that that parcel is not producing any tax revenue, UVA avoids paying over $20 million in taxes, which creates a structural inability to fund public education. I say all that just because I know the school board published an op-ed requesting that the city get together with city schools and request a meeting with UVA to discuss the impact of their decisions as well as the tax situation. I know they made a public comment about it earlier, and I just think it would be warranted to pursue that.
thank you. We'll now go to the consent agenda. Oh,
Can I make a quick update about the consent agenda? I realized I should have said this earlier, but I would like to pull number 11 out for a separate vote.
is there support to pull out the Dogwood Vietnam Memorial Foundation of Virginia from the consent agenda? Is that something we usually get a
I think usually just if anybody wants to, it's taken out.
Okay.
I don't think it's a vote.
Okay. Okay.
Thanks.
We'll act on that. Act on that separately. No. So can I get a what? You read the consent.
Consent agenda 4, resolution to appropriate Virginia Department of Criminal Justice Services Victims of Crime Act Grant Award FY25, $123,600, second reading. 5, resolution to appropriate $26,210.96 to the Charlottesville Albemarle Society for the Prevention of Cruelty to Animals, second reading. 6, resolution to appropriate $20,000 in Virginia Department of Criminal Justice Services Children's Justice Act one-time grant program funds, second reading. 7, resolution to appropriate police warehouse outlet sales revenue to equipment replacement fund, second reading. 8, resolution to appropriate $7,285.76 from the Virginia Department of Social Services to use for overtime for Medicaid unwinding, one of 2 readings. 9, resolution to appropriate $419,279 in additional funding received from the Virginia Department of Social Services to support staffing and operations, one of 2 readings. 9, resolution to appropriate $15,000 from NLC Southern Cities Economic Initiative Program to use for project planning, one of 2 readings. Item 11 has been pulled. 12, resolution to allocate $134,967 from Charlottesville Strategic Initiatives Fund to support local services agencies. 13, resolution to appropriate $304.80 in state assistance and citizen donation for spay and neuter program at SPCA. And 14, resolution accepting 3 streets into the city's street maintenance program.
Is there a second?
I move adoption of the consent agenda
A second.
As amended, second.
as amended.
The motion passes 5-0. The next item on the agenda is the city manager's report. Mr. Sanders?
Yes, Mr. Mayor, members of the public, we have our quarterly financial report that we're going to begin with. Ms. Hamill and Mr. Cullinan are going to brief you all on current financial activities.
Good evening, Council. Chrissy Hamill, Director of Budget. As Mr. Sanders mentioned, we're going to present to you the third quarter financial report for FY25, the current year. And we're going to do this in 3 parts. I'm going to give you the most boring part, and then Mr. Cullinan's going to talk about ARP, and then Mr. Freese will talk to you about a new CIP dashboard or report. So at the end of March 31st, that ended our third quarter. Our revenues are approximately, or were 67.5% collected. Keep in mind that our real estate, which is one of our largest revenue sources, is due on June 5th, the second half, or the first half, excuse me, of FY25 taxes. This year's budget is just over $251 million. We're about, the current revenues, if you can switch to the next page, please. The revenues are tracking slightly above that, just at $4 million, or 1.8%. As a note, this year, in comparison, third quarter, our revenue surplus was just a little over $11.5 million. So as we look to this chart, you'll notice that our major drivers continue to be the real estate assessment and personal property, sales and use, transient, room or lodging tax, and meals tax are all still lagging. They are continuing to not perform as well as what we've seen. However, we do note that with the lower percentages here, we are getting back more to what we think are our normal trends for revenue growth. We're not going to be experiencing double digits percents anymore. And so with that, I'm happy to answer any questions on that part of the presentation. Expenses are tracking pretty much with budget. So don't think we're going to have tens of millions of dollars of surplus. We are not anticipating that. We are anticipating a much smaller surplus than we have had in the past. And so I think what this tells us is that generally our trends are moving more to something that's a little more normal, or what we have seen more over time. We're kind of out of that COVID up and down, hopefully.
Thank you so much. I realized I should have asked you this earlier, and I'm sorry.
That's okay.
But I think it would be interesting to see the quarterly year-over-year comparisons.
Sure.
Just because I wonder if, like, first quarter is generally, like, a little slow, or, third quarter, first 3 months of the year. Is generally, like, winter and not a lot of travel, and then so for lodging and sales taxes to be low at this point might be kind of okay, because then the next quarter we've got graduation and like all the things of spring is springing, and so things pick up, and I think that it'd be
happy to get you that. Just keep in mind this is an annual projection, so this is taking into account all of that. This is our projection as of the third quarter, but it is an annual projection.
So it does capture
the
spring of last year.
It does.
Got it. Okay.
Yeah.
Thank you.
So this is what we're anticipating for the year to end.
Got it. Okay.
And then, of course, we don't present a fourth quarter report. That comes to you through Mr. Cullinan at the conclusion of the audit with the results.
Okay. Then never mind.
No problem.
Yeah.
We'll still get it for you, though.
Okay.
So-
But
Yeah, so
thank you
we've
for
got it.
Thank you for explaining that.
So, Chrissy, so for, you've been involved this a long time.
A long time.
Yeah. Yeah, I didn't ask for that. He kind of threw that in.
Just want to lighten it a little bit.
So, is there anything on this sheet that keeps you awake at night?
I don't want to say there's anything that necessarily keeps me awake. I think it is good. It is different for us to actually see revenues underperforming. We have generally, as we've talked about a lot, we generally take our projections and we're pretty conservative with those. We were not anticipating declines like this, especially since we had raised the lodging tax and the meals tax. Meals is, hanging in there. Lodging definitely is not bouncing back like it was.
So I just would like to ask staff to keep this on your radar. If there's anything that we can do as council to address, as we're moving along, because to have a strong business community allow us to do all of those things that we can do to make this community open for everyone. I don't want to wait till like end of the year, or, we could have done something 6 months earlier or
No,
whatever.
fair
So,
point.
thank
We would be singing
Yeah.
from the,
Yeah, thank
Since
you.
I've been here since Thomas Jefferson.
Yeah.
We'd be letting you know early.
I'm going to pay for that.
Yeah, I will say that, this is purely, well, not completely anecdotal, but it aligns with what restaurant owners are telling us, at least on the downtown mall. Whatever the causes of that, I won't speculate on, but, yeah.
And I know it's interesting, the vacancy rate in Barracks Shopping Center is significantly higher than the downtown mall vacancy rates. But regardless, so I mean, what we're seeing though is still a robust surplus. It's just not, crazy out of whack like during COVID. So it's not as if the economy is, our local economy is, falling apart or flailing. I mean, there's still a surplus. That's how I read it.
We
It's just
hope.
not.
All right, so this is only
a-
half of the, excuse me for interrupting, let me just, so this is only half of the picture. We have not gotten to the expenses. So, will we have a surplus? To be honest, from where I sit, yes, we shoot for 2 to 5%. That's where we'd like to be, because we certainly would rather have extra than be short. But we still have another quarter of the year to go, and we still need to see the expenditure side. And if revenues are cut from the federal government and we have other expenses to go, we might not have a surplus.
No, that's definitely fair.
Yeah, and I'm not trying to panic, but I think that people are telling us that they're getting hit in those categories, and that's what we're hearing, and it's lining up with this data. Now, that doesn't prove causality, but I'm just simply notifying, I'm just simply acknowledging that there's a correlation.
One more question about lodging. I know in a couple of years ago, there was some controversy over whether or not we were getting accurate information from the Airbnb and those type of services about, because they're supposed to handle the lodging tax revenue and then turn it over to us, but they also don't share their data, so there's nothing for us to cross-reference. Have we seen a change in the revenue on that front that raises any flags, or is that felt consistent?
So I would defer, we can find that answer. I will defer to Mr. Divers and others who work with that data more closely than myself. I will just remind you that in the budget, we actually included software that will help make that a compliance issue, where it will actually help us to pull that data out and make sure we're collecting what we need to collect.
Yeah, I'm looking forward to that. Okay, thank you. I was just wondering if maybe that had any.
So we owe you quarterly, year over year, and then we'll get you more in depth about the Airbnb.
Thank you so much.
And I'll defer to Mr. Collins.
Good evening, Mr. Mayor, members of council. I'm Chris Cullinan, the city's director of finance. The city manager asked me to give you an update on the status of the city's American Rescue Plan funds, also known as ARP. As you recall, beginning in 2021 and 2022, the city received approximately $19.6 million in relief funds, ARP relief funds from the federal government. To date, through the end of March, we've spent about to the end of March, we spent about $18.4 million of those funds. And what you see in the chart on the right side up there is what's remaining or what's obligated, and it's approximately $1.2 million across a couple of different projects that are still underway. And just to refresh your memory, at the end of December, we passed the first significant milestone in the ARP legislation, which was by that day we had all the funds obligated. And what that meant was not just appropriated, but obligated in terms of being on a contract, a purchase order, some sort of formal purchasing mechanism. And any funds that were unobligated had to be returned to the U.S. Treasury. And so we concluded last calendar year, all of the city's funds were obligated. We didn't return any to the federal government. And so what you see up here is the outstanding balance of those obligated funds. The next big deadline is December 31st, 2026, and that's when we have to have these spent by. And so departments who have these projects are going to be spending these over that period of time. Some of these projects are one-off sorts of things. They'll be done, purchase expended. Some of these will extend through the end of that time period. They've been planned out in that manner. And so I have to make a report to the U.S. Treasury every quarter on what we've actually spent. So we'll start working our way through these funds over the next approximately year and a half. One thing I also want to mention, and we've talked a little bit about this in the context of the city's financial relationship with the federal government, I have not heard any language nor seen any that has talked about or contemplating clawing back any already obligated funds, that $1.2 million that you see up there on the screen. That is still a concern. And so in talking with the city manager, we've been accruing interest income on our unspent ARP funds over the entirety of that period, and it approximates almost as much as you see up there. And so our recommendation is we're going to keep that interest income in our back pocket for the time being in the event these funds are somehow clawed back, so that we have a backstop against these projects, that we can continue to go ahead and fund these projects through their completion. And so that ARP interest will then be used for that. In the event that doesn't happen, then those funds are free for reappropriation at some point in the future. And just to conclude, the only, as I mentioned, I haven't heard any language about clawing these funds back. They seem to be more focused on those entities who did not obligate all their funds by the end of December. Sometime in January, February, we received a very strong, I would call collections letter from the U.S. Treasury saying, please remit any unobligated funds ASAP with the appropriate banking information and so forth. But since then, there really hasn't been much outside of the norm. As I mentioned, we still do quarterly reports to U.S. Treasury, which we've been doing this whole period of time. So be happy to answer any questions you might have.
Can you go over that interest business again?
Sure.
So from my understanding, we have that money set aside for projects that will be happening over the next year and a half.
No, the interest income that's been accruing on that idle cash really it's unobligated, unappropriated.
No, sorry, right, the interest bit, but the idle cash, that is set aside for projects.
Yes, that's the 1.2 million that you see there.
So then the rationale that I think I understood you just said was, we're gonna keep that idle cash until it gets spent, but if it gets clawed back, we have that interest just in case.
Correct.
But why wouldn't we just try and spend it?
Well, that's a risk.
As soon as possible.
Well, that is a choice. The interest income, there are no obligations in terms of how it can be used. There are no conditions on it. However, as I mentioned, with as the evolving nature of the relationship with the federal government, it would be a risk in that if there is a clawback of $1.2 million worth of money, we don't have anything readily identified to go ahead and do these projects. And so it's certainly a choice, but it does carry some risk.
Sorry, what is the choice being proposed?
The choice being, we either spend it as soon as we can and forgo further earned interest, or spend it as planned, hope it doesn't get clawed back, but if it does, we can spend that earned interest to help make at least part of that whole.
Yeah, but what I would say to you is, as Mr. Cullen is explaining, the $1.3 million that we have in interest, is a little bit, 1.5 I think is the number now, is the stopgap to what you see on the screen. So if the federal government were to come at any point in the next few months and say, give us what you have not actually spent, then the $1.3 million that we have, we could tell our team, continue doing what you're doing, because the interest they're not going to claw back is what we believe.
Right,
We'll have to hope.
but then the flip side to that is we spend the 1.2 and then we can also spend the 1.5
Later.
instead of only being
that's-
able to spend it once.
But we would do that later, again, because the point of holding the interest is so that it remains a stopgap in case they pull these funds back first.
Right, but then that means we're only spending it one time instead of spending it 2 times.
You
and
will
getting-
get to spend it a second time because the interest will be available later after we after
Right,
we spend
but
these dollars.
Right, so, but if we have the 1.2 and the 1.5, the 1.5 is the interest, the 1.2 is the money. If they claw that back, that fills the gap. We
Yes.
spend one amount
Correct.
of money. If we spend this and then spend this, we've spent double, so we've gotten.
We can't guarantee that the 1.2 will get spent any faster than what we've already accounted for.
Okay.
So if the government comes back and takes it before, we lose it. Then
That
that means
is-
I'm coming back to you,
That's a
asking
useful
you to
piece of
allocate other
information,
funds.
that there's no faster way to spend
Right,
it. than
because
what we
some of
have
these
right.
projects are actually slated to happen next fiscal year even, as we get closer to the 2026 deadline, because it may take that long for them to be implemented, so that's the risk.
And there's nothing else we could spend that money
That's
on.
right. Well, because we've already passed that deadline, so it's
Right, we
earmarked
can't
for this
reallocate
purpose.
it.
Yes.
Got it, okay. Thank you very much.
Sure. Any other questions on ARP status?
How long have you been keeping up with this now?
A long time.
Since 2021.
As long as Ms. Hamill's been giving the budget update.
You all are in a mood tonight. And on that note, I'll turn it over to Mr. Frias to discuss the new CIP reporting tool.
I guess I have something new to share. All right, good evening, Mayor Wade, members of council. My name is James Friest, Deputy City Manager for Operations. So tonight, and I think coming up on the screen shortly, hopefully, I'm very pleased to be presenting our capital project dashboard. This tool will be available to council, of course, and to the public, and will allow people to track the, to see the status of construction projects and where they are in terms of development and see their financial status. What we're sharing today is essentially a demonstration of this tool. So it has a select set of high-profile projects that we've included in it, and we will make this live. And then over time, we're going to build this out with the remainder of the items that you can find on the CIP. So with Brian Ray's help, he's going to help me demonstrate this. We're just going to walk through what you have up there in front of you. So first off, up in the right-hand side is the list of projects. That shows the financial status of each project, and it can be sorted in different ways. But the interesting thing here is that the dollar figures you see there are drawing live out of our financial software. So this is effectively live data that's updated every day, basically overnight. Then in the bottom right corner, you see a map that shows each point is one of those projects up on that list. Then you see a pie chart, kind of in the bottom middle. That right now is showing you the total status of our CIP, but watch that space, it will change as we go through. Then in the bottom left is basically a list of, or a bar graph showing the allocation of the projects that are shown up in the right in terms of different categories that we've identified. So then if we click on the transportation one, thank you, Brian. Now our list up in the top right is just showing our transportation projects. Our map is showing the locations of our transportation projects, and again, that pie chart is showing the financial status of transportation projects. So you can see it updates as we move through it. So now if we click on the Rugby Avenue project, fun. Now we got pictures, and as we scroll down, we get information about the project. So in this case, we have the design date, what people really care about, the end date for the project, the anticipated end date, and some narrative information about the project, what's happening, and that kind of thing. So you can see that for each project. Now we can also see the map is updated with the location of this project, and our pie chart has updated with the financial status of this project. So then if we click on the new sidewalks item, this is one of our multiple projects. So you see the map now has 2 points on it because this is currently showing two of our sidewalk projects, and the narrative description describes both of those projects with images, and then it also describes some of the other upcoming projects that haven't been included in the other information available just yet.
Just noted in passing, St. Clair Avenue is misspelled.
We got that, thank you. All right. So the narratives and the pictures, those are all updated by our project managers in Public Works. So as they're working on the project, this is where they put in their updates, and that's actually a live feed from the budget book landing page as well. So, so really the idea here is there's just a lot of automated work in place to try and minimize the degree to which we have people spending time putting this together, whilst also providing a great deal of information out to the public and to council. So I want to thank our budget office for putting this together. I'd like to thank our Public Works Department for providing all this data and doing the work of actually making sure this stuff is available and ultimately doing the work of getting all this stuff built. So happy to answer any questions on this. Thank you.
I would just say, I think the budget tools we had before were amazing from a transparency level for the public to actually look at each department, what they're doing. And I think this for the CIP is just really fantastic for the public actually being able to make sense of our budget and have public accountability. And I'm one of those possibly deranged people who actually looks at other localities' budgets. And I think just this really stands out from what I see as a standard practice of how accessible and transparent those budgets are. So I think it's just, a great thing.
I also think that the amount of information is just right. People don't necessarily need blueprints, but it's great to have the photos.
Yeah, the
so
pictures
people
is
have
a
a reference
game
point
changer.
of,
Yeah.
people can read an intersection and it's hard for it to come to mind. But having the picture there is great. And then something for the map, that's also very useful, but I'm also kind of interested in keeping a dot even after the project has been completed, but maybe it's like faded or something so people can see the progress over time. And one of the things that's great about infrastructure projects is they are visible representation of your government at work. And so we don't want to necessarily clutter the map, but maybe some kind of overlay of finished projects, current projects, so that people can look and see, oh wow, this is what all of the time and effort and tax dollars have gone towards, and have kind of a historical
We can
repository.
noodle on that. The map could get filled up. Ideally, it gets filled up. Remember, we have a lot more projects to add, and I failed to note, Brian, that you can actually click on those dots, and it will also take you to the landing page.
Yeah,
for each project.
that's great. And I know all of these projects are currently underway, so they're all going to be active dots. But at some point, future past dots would be, I think, cool to see. But this is awesome, and I think probably kind of exactly what we were looking for.
We all have been waiting for this.
Yes.
I've been waiting for it. in
Yeah, I was going to
particular.
ask Councilor Snook, how are you feeling about this?
A long
Hey,
time.
It's looking real good.
Do we need to tell the good folks over at Ravenna they need to up their game?
That's right.
I think so. I think we
Yeah.
passed them with this.
I think so.
I've been telling folks for 4 years that I really wanted the city to have the same degree of reporting that the Ravenna water and sewer people had and solid waste people had. This is a whole lot more graphic. That's one thing. It's really cool, a lot more interactive in that respect. But I'm looking forward to geeking out with it. Thank you.
Yeah, thank y'all. I know there's a lot of work.
Yeah.
All right.
Thank
James,
you.
One more thing?
Yeah, sorry, are we showing that
Yes.
first? Yeah. So, we are getting ready to show a, PSA for our school zone speed cameras. Is it coming up now?
Yeah, Remy's going to pull it up.
Great.
Yeah, I'm pulling it up now.
And I'll just note while we're waiting for that to come up, just a huge thank you out to our communications team for putting this together. They did really an amazing job, as you all will see shortly. And to our citizens and employees who have turned themselves into stars here, I think.
And I would like to point out that I've already come across this organically on social media, which means the team has been putting it out there.
Yep, yeah. Brennan, you got to start talking.
Yeah, Brendan, you want to come up to the mic?
Let's find some audio.
Stand by, trying to get the sound to work. This worked when I tested it earlier, and now it's not.
All right, well, yes, we can just remind everyone that the PSA is on social media, and we'll get it on the website for those who frequent the webpage. We wanted to really get Brendan to blush a little bit, so to our city engineer, thank you for participating. I think the key component there is, as the deliverable of the CIP dashboard just shows you, when we push hard and get things done, you then can be pleased and the public can be satisfied. The speed cameras has been a long delayed project as well. We've been able to get that done. It'll be up a couple weeks, active for a couple weeks. Is that the plan?
It's active starting today, and it's active through the end of the school year, a couple weeks.
Yeah, and then that'll allow us to kick the tires and get ourselves ready for a full school year when they come back on and at the start of their school year.
Would you like questions from us about it now, or should we wait for later?
Sure, we have the right people in the room for it.
I was just wondering about the cutoff for a ticket at 11 over and where that number comes from.
Oh, did you want to come up here? More welcome to it. I can probably talk a little bit from the court standpoint.
Sure. Council members, Brendan Duncan, city engineer. So really it comes from the state statute for what they allow for this program for the video detection. So the 10 over or 11 over is kind of what was set forth in the enabling legislation for it. So that's kind of what we're stuck with using.
We can't bring it any lower?
Nope.
Okay. Yet.
Any additional questions or?
I was just thinking, you know, so I've heard that number for like highways, but you know, the difference between 60 and 71 as a percentage is a lot smaller than the difference between 15 and 26. And, you know, it's not like commensurately smaller based on the lower speeds. And so I was kind of hoping that we might have had some flexibility there.
Yeah, I think Brendan said it best, but in general to your question, Counselor, the courts are generally don't like to see citations or summonses for stuff under that 10-mile threshold. I mean, that's not to say you can't get a ticket for, I don't want anyone to think you can't get a ticket for going under 10 miles over the speed limit, but in general, that's typically what judges prefer to see.
But we could.
I mean, not with the cameras. Brendan's correct. State legislation only enables us that. But in general, when it comes to speeding, you know, we want our officers to be reasonable.
Okay. But this is not, I just want to be clear to the public, this is not an encouragement.
It is not, because if an officer gets you speeding and you're going through a school zone, you know, they could write you a ticket for 2 miles over, technically.
Yeah. Yeah. Okay. Thank you.
Yep.
All right, I do have a presentation, but Ms. Marshall has a reminder for the public as I'm moving to the podium.
Sure, thank you very much, Mr. City Manager. We'd like to remind both council, in case you all haven't taken it, and the public that the Polco National Community Survey is open for anyone to take. You may have heard the city manager remind individuals who received mailings to please take those. There are 2 layers to this survey. One is our statistically sound survey, which is a random sampling of members of the community. That's who got a postcard. But we also wanted to make sure absolutely anyone in the community who lives here, works here, or plays here can take the survey to give us some feedback on our work and how we're doing. That survey is available online in both English and Spanish, and a news blast in both English and Spanish went out recently, so we would really enjoy if anyone can take it, and I'm really excited. We have nearly 500 people who've already taken the online survey, so if I can add a couple more, I'd really love to beat my number from the last time we did it in 2022, which I think I maybe made it to 700. So all of that information is, again, online, polco.us. You can look for the City of Charlottesville, and it's also thanks to our fantastic communications team members on social media, on our website, and it is in my report to council.
Thank you.
Do we want to try the video?
Remy, are you going to try the video again?
Yes, I'm going to try it again.
Okay, go ahead. I'll take credit for it now.
No.
No, maybe I won't.
No.
All right,
Yes.
we tried.
Thanks, Remy.
So as we're pulling up the PowerPoint, this is Community Interventions 2.0 is what I've called it. Back in October, I came before you, Council, to share with you a series of recommendations that I had categorized for things that we just need to seriously take a hard look at. They were aimed at being things focused on setting a new standard and managing expectations. We have been hearing a lot from our larger, broader public on things that they just felt that the council and the city manager's office could work on. So I brought forward a series of things to kind of take your temperature on, see what you're interested in doing, what kind of willingness we may have had. We didn't have our surplus figure at that time. We have since, of course, learned that we had a very healthy surplus, but we also have had just a few positive things that have occurred. And what I wanted to do tonight was to take you back through some of those things, specify where I am interested in having you join me in support of us doing some certain things. I've added some things, worked with the team to develop a few more details on a few things as well. So I'm just going to walk you through this and basically frame this as a preview to the first bite at the surplus that's been sitting. And I know for some of you, you've been very interested in when was I going to bring an item for you to approve spending some of the surplus. I'm not doing it tonight, but that will happen on June 2nd. But I'm going to show you what I have put together as a group project by this team as the first batch that will be joined with joined to some other items that our wonderful budget director, Ms. Hamill, has worked on helping me spend money. And you know, normally I'm always spending her money. This time she's spending what I consider to be mine. But we're looking at community safety, homeless intervention, and quality of life items. Everything that I do is tying your vision to what it is that we're doing as a team and reminding the team that we are obligated to do exactly that. Make sure that council's vision of to be a place where everyone thrives is why we do what we do and how we do it. So in the community safety space, we're looking at infrastructure investments. The first category you see there is urgent infrastructure. You'll recall back in October, we had a fatality in a crosswalk on Elliott Avenue. It spurred a lot of interest and feedback. It was one of those things that we didn't want that to go without any real response. So a lot of effort has been put by the transportation planning team to come up with 34 projects that they have identified for me that will be done by the end of this year. That's what he said. It'll be done by the end of this year. So now you get to hold him responsible for that.
Calendar year or fiscal?
Calendar year, December 2025, we'll be done with all 34 projects.
Where did Brennan go?
Yes. So there's a lot of stuff on that list. For $500,000, we'll get those things done. We had some interest in why wouldn't we just have a second tranche, a third, fourth, and fifth. My statement on that is these are urgent things. These are things that we can do. Anything beyond that should be at the top of the list that we continue to work on, so there won't be another urgent infrastructures list. This is really just our prioritizing getting these projects done that we believe we can get done in a very timely manner. And there's a whole host of things, and we'll bring you more information on that as well. Bus shelter infrastructure, we've been working with a state grant, I believe it is, that we have that's been making it possible for us to add bus shelter infrastructure. We have identified locations in the city and the county that we're looking to put those shelters in, and we have developers who are also going to be funding some of the projects as a part of their development projects. So we're asking to spend $250,000 towards making sure that all 12 of these bus shelters get done. And then
is the three part of the 7?
Yes, because it's 12 total. But 3 of the 12 will be funded separately by developers themselves. Parks and recreation infrastructure, this is one I just make sure I want to explain to you that the Meadow Creek Trail is here because I previously brought to you an item to allocate funds from ARP to be used for the Meadow Creek Trail, which has been one of our long labored projects that has not necessarily gotten to completion. But we had identified ARP funds, but as Mr. Cullen has described to you, we were running out of time on being able to make sure that we could spend those funds by the December deadline. So those funds were pulled back, and I shared with the Parks team that what I would do is make a request in the surplus to replace those funds so that the project could continue. What has happened is that we have found that cost increases have still made this project infeasible. We're working on bidding it yet again, but the request that I've identified here, you see 1.1 million is actually two parts. It's $750,000 for the Meadow Creek Trail and $350,000 for downtown mall improvements. And those downtown mall improvements would be associated with implementing items from the downtown mall downtown mall action plan that we had spent some time with a whole host of stakeholders to identify things that we could do to invest in our central amenity. Emergency management, this is the first time I'm coming to you asking for emergency management funds. I told you I would. I believe that we're behind in this space. This is something that we should have spent some significant money on. I think 2017 should have taught us a lesson to do some things differently, and I feel like it's now time for us to deliver on that. We don't have a generator at our year-round shelter, which is Key Rec Center, and this is identifying an opportunity for us to add a generator to that facility so that if we ever found ourselves in a situation where we need to be able to house the public in response to a disaster, they have a place to go and we can keep them comfortable. So that is the first expenditure that we've identified. Meridian barriers, which I'll show you on the next slide. If you were at the Tom Tom Festival, you saw them deployed. The chief surprised me with that feature, in that we roll them out, and I actually went and stood on one because I just wanted to see how strong it was. But it was an opportunity for us to see how we can get this in place. This is something that we probably should have invested significant money in. We still have some questions about exactly which versions of the barriers that they have available that we should get, but I'm identifying a use for funds to be able to do that. And our fire department is looking to have 2 drones added to their arsenal for being able to investigate situations, including an active fire or even when someone goes missing. It gives them a chance to be able to try to identify them in their emergency response. This is the Meridian barrier. There's two different aspects to it. The big piece that you see in the middle is what we had deployed up and down the mall in different of our crossings. I don't think we had the lift gate.
We did.
We did have the lift gate, but I knew we had a version of a gate. So the lift gate is an opportunity for you to put the barriers themselves in 2 places and a lift gate to allow cars to still pass through. This being a vehicle barrier system. This is the system that was eventually deployed in New Orleans that should have been out before their tragic accident happened there. But this is one of the companies that has been used in a number of significant ways. The federal government actually has a contract with them. Many U.S. cities and international cities are using it, and highway work zones are actually using versions of them as well. And in my research, I found that you can actually brand them. So I'm going to have Afton put this Charlottesville logo on each one of these when we put them out there so that people see that.
What's the little cart you have in there?
That's to move them around, to make it easy for you to.
Get that as part of the 600,000?
It's all in there too. Yeah, and the trailer. The goal is to be able to move them around because you're going to need all that help if we get that many. If we get a good number of them, we'll figure out exactly how many. But the goal is that if we buy a number of them, I'm hoping that we'll get a little discount.
And then just for the public's benefit, it means that we're not having a public works truck
That's
stationed
correct.
there with someone in it.
Yeah, we have always, a lot of cities do that where they use vehicles, use trucks, trash trucks and things like that to block intersections. And while at times that may be effective, what happened in New Orleans is they had that exact same setup and the individual went around it and jumped on the sidewalk. So what we were able to do with TomTom is we were able to put these on the sidewalk, still preserve ADA accessibility, because I know we have that conversation coming up shortly. But we were able to do both, and I think that's really what we want to make sure that we can do here and manage that ourselves.
Well, I think I think this is also important, I mean, in the context of our local history, and like the Heafy report on 4th Street, there was a
Yes.
barrier that day that was removed because it wasn't flexible, so it was removed to let normal vehicular traffic through. But it was supposed to be closed with a barrier at the
Right.
time the attack occurred. So anyway, I mean, it's just a long-standing
Exactly. And that would be
feature.
the
There's no
reason
barrier.
for the lift gate, because if we did want to allow a vehicle under a controlled environment, we could lift that, allow the vehicle to move through. But if we didn't want any vehicles to go through, then you would have those barriers in place and you lock them into place. No one can move them unless they know what they're doing. And that would be one of the primary advantages to being able to do something like this. So we're excited about that. But again, we tried them at TomTom. They worked well. Of course, nobody tried to go through, but they were really a good visible deterrent. And that's really the message that we're trying to send, to not then put our equipment and our people, because what we also have done is not only do we put the vehicle in the traffic lane, we put our individuals there as well, and we should not use our people as a shield. All right, in homeless intervention, I know there's a lot of interest in this space. We've, as any other city in America, has been struggling with how to do things to solve our problems. The goal is to figure out how to do it with compassion. As we right now still have this conversation, as you heard earlier, a lot of the work that's being done with our providers, we're not yet at a place that we can say that we have an overnight shelter year-round as a low-barrier shelter, but that work is still going on. In the meantime, one of the recommendations that I brought to you that we are sticking with is a 2-year pilot to hire 2 outreach workers that we can deploy with resources to go out and engage directly with the homeless individuals. They'd be doing that as city employees, which is not something we've had access to before. And I think that there is an opportunity for us to maybe work with them in ways that we can manage the situation so that everyone is handled with kid gloves, but we can actually move people where we need them to be in less invasive manners, and hopefully learn some things and support them as we try to move them along that ladder to self-sufficiency where possible. I talked to you about pallet shelters. This isn't the only option that we have, but I am still in this pitch moment with you, saying that if we have identified a piece of property where we can test this out for the right individual or individuals who find themselves unhoused today, we are interested in trying this. It is a temporary placement. We have identified a couple of locations. They're not perfect. I don't want to disclose where they are because I don't want emails or phone calls tomorrow. But the goal is to figure out how do we do this in a way that we can ensure that wraparound services are met at each one of those doors. We're not just putting people in these little places and leaving them alone. The goal is to work with them and help them move.
It's
And
$375 for 3 units.
yes, and that would be to receive them, set them up, and then connect to
And it's
services.
just a single bed or 2 beds inside?
There's 2 different versions of it. We're not sure if where we are looking, we can fit the larger one. There's also a version that is 1 bed with an actual restroom facility inside the unit. If it's just the single unit where you see those 2 individuals, there's no facility inside, so we would have to arrange to have porta potties or something like that adjacent to this. But the goal, again, is to try to test the concept. So we're kicking the tires on different approaches, different things that we might be able to do. And we're still looking at alternatives like tiny houses and other options. But again, this is to point out that we're asking you for resources so that we can make a decision and move on something. And again, try as many things as possible, as you heard earlier today, because it's complicated. And then the quality of life space. I showed you these pictures when I came back from a conference in Pittsburgh. They are still cemented in my brain, and others keep reminding me this is the help that we need on our downtown mall. Our mall turns 50 years old next year. We'll be celebrating its 50th anniversary next year, and we need individuals who are caring for it in this manner on a regular basis. So ideally, what we're hoping to do is to establish a mall manager, so there's a dedicated person who is responsible for all things on the mall. I'm looking at a long-term restroom solution. I have pulled multiple people outside on the mall and asked them to walk with me, and let's go look at a place that we can put a restroom. And I know that people won't like the decisions as to where they will go, and I will make sure that they talk to the 5 of you and not me, because we need to solve this problem. So the goal is to bring some of those options forward. A clean team demonstration is the request that I'm making. It is at a significant cost. I'll show you the cost shortly. But again, it is what we believe is necessary. If you walk out on the mall any day of the week, our Parks and Recreation team is doing the best that they can, and they are doing a great job in the limited time with the limited resources that we've allocated for them to maintain the mall in an AM posture. They work in the mornings most of the time. We need to make sure that we are caring for this amenity on a daily basis, all day long into the evening, because people are using it that much. So there's a lot more that we need to do, and additional lighting features is something that I believe we need to strongly pay some attention to, because when it gets dark, it gets dark. I've added some accessibility matters. While we have in our budget that you have adopted, we've added significant resources for ADA implementation. There are some additional items that we want to make sure that we have available. You'll hear more about that transition plan coming shortly. But our anchor team has been working, and they have exceeded all expectations. I'm very proud of what I've seen them be able to accomplish in this short period of time. But they need software because they've actually been able to reach so many people and then to be able to manage the information. So we're looking to get that software program. It's called Gelada. And then CART translation services and Blue DAG tracking software are things that are going to help us in our ADA space, especially in tracking the work that we're doing on the ADA implementation work after you get the transition plan this evening. So this is where you get the details. This is what it's going to cost. So again, this is a preview to the surplus item that I'm going to bring to you on June 2nd. They will be larger than this. I'm just showing you that what I just went through adds up to $5.4 million. We'll be adding additional things to it. But the good news in this moment is, while these things add up to $5.4 million, we had $2.8 million that was being held for backup to the ARP allocations that we are now able to release because we've been able to spend the money down to that $1.2 million that Mr. Cullinan showed you, and the interest is enough to back that up. So that $2.8 million can now be spent, along with we received $2.6 million in gain sharing back from city schools. That is unbudgeted, unallocated funds. So that $5.4 million matches my number. I made sure that it matched that number, so I had to make some adjustments on how far I would let James go with mall improvements and other things to make the number match, because again, I wanted to show you some discipline since I asked you to do the same, but to demonstrate how we can pay for this without, at this moment, I have not touched the $22 million surplus for FY24. That money remains intact, still available to us to make other decisions that may need to be made. And again, I remind you that my concern is, until we have a federal budget that is passed, we don't know what the impact of the federal government changes will be, and this local government needs to be able to respond, because it's going to happen. There's going to be some impacts, and if we can hold on to that surplus, we can at least smooth some of that out. So I'll end there with any questions.
I think it's brilliant.
Yeah,
Go do it.
You've heard us, and you've heard the business owners and the residents, so. Yep.
I would, a couple thoughts. One, I'm not opposed to the pallet idea by any means, and obviously I think trying to do a demonstration is worthwhile. I have a lot of questions about what implement, even just from like a liability standpoint. What if someone has a medical emergency in one of these pallets? I mean, just a lot of questions about how the whole thing would work, especially if we're doing it directly and not in partnership with some existing affordable housing.
There's still a
providers.
chance of that. That's part of what we'll look at too.
And I'm not saying it has to be that route. I just have a lot of questions. The other is, I think it would be a positive thing to do, but I still have a lot of questions around spending that amount of money on the clean team on the downtown mall. Does that really pass a cost-benefit analysis of solving what the real issues on the mall are? Or is it more spending that amount of money to try to make people feel more comfortable, but it's not addressing what the core issues are? And I'll say, I think if it's not worked out and we haven't figured out how to do it, that's fine. But to have this presentation, if we're not also clear that we are still committed to building a permanent year-round homeless shelter, I think the investment in something like a street team is just theater that is not about actually addressing the actual problem of homelessness. I take away from what we heard earlier tonight, this is a population of people, some of whom are coming out of referred by Region 10 or hospitals, medical emergencies, mental health addiction emergencies. They need a space to get referred to Medicaid. People who have an income, they're on Social Security, disability, making $900 a month. Point being, the only way we solve it is with a shelter, and then a shelter that can be connected to permanent supportive housing. And I worry for that amount of cost, we should be able to have some honesty. I think the thing that makes people uncomfortable in the mall that they're upset about is being there late at night when there's not a lot of foot traffic, and sometimes there's more homeless people in the mall than there are customers walking around, and that makes some people uncomfortable. And if as a city, we're not saying we're solving that core problem of homelessness by trying to build a shelter and permanent supportive housing, I just don't think we're doing anything. I mean, it's just theater.
Yeah.
So I just say, I know that this may not exclude that, but I know in the past, a permanent year-round homeless shelter was in these recommendations, and if it's been taken out, I think we have made an enormous mistake from a public policy standpoint.
Yeah.
I don't say that to you or staff, but to council.
Well, let me just make sure I clarify, because I don't want you to believe that there has been a change in posture on a low barrier shelter year-round. That is a top priority. That remains a top priority. It is not here only because of the state that we're in with the partners that we're working with to give them time to determine what an operating plan could look like. I will still be coming back to you, looking at investing further if it is necessary based on those proposals. But you've already earmarked funds for the operations of a low barrier shelter that was included in the FY26 budget. And we are already committed to supporting the Salvation Army for the transition of the thrift store to that facility, should that actually happen. If that doesn't happen, where that becomes the actual facility, there's still $500,000 per year available to operate something somewhere. We just have to figure out where that is. And if we don't do that at the thrift store on Cherry Avenue, then the set aside in the CIP will not be used for that, and that's up to $1 million that can be reallocated for something else, like another location. So I just want to make sure that you recognize that while it's not in this presentation, it is not gone. It is a top priority. It is still a priority. And Mr. Engel could come to the microphone and tell you right now that as of Friday, I said, I need you to start looking for alternative locations again, because I just want to have a plan D, E, and F in place should that not happen.
Yeah, no, and I think that alleviates, some of my concerns, probably misinterpreting, where things stand in terms of the recommendations. Again, I think it's a positive idea, but just $1.6 million for that is a staggering price tag.
And remember, that's for 2 years. I mean, and that's the point of it being a spread out period. And I will submit, as I did in October, we should be caring for the mall because we care about the mall. It is such a great amenity for us to have that other communities wish they had. We need to take care of it. So while, yes, there's an issue of the presence of unhoused, it will not eliminate that. It is not intended to eliminate that. It is intended to mitigate some of the symptoms of that occurrence. It is also meant to take care of certain things that don't get taken care of in a timely manner. And it does add a sense of safety and security for some. I've also heard from a lot of people who would say to us, we need to do something. And these are the same folks who have said, and I'm not saying that you need to remove the homeless people, you just need to make sure that it is neat and tidy and taken care of. So I am subscribing to that notion. This is not meant to be aggressive. There is a component to the options that we may have that we can actually work with engaging the homeless individuals out there differently. Again, leading with compassion is the priority that I feel like I've heard from all of you, and our goal is to make sure that we live that out in whatever options we go with.
Yes, thank you for this presentation. I am excited about a lot of the things on here. The urgent infrastructure projects, especially with the timeline by the end of this year, especially considering that it's almost June.
That's what I said.
And I know that, once leaf removal and snow clearing happen, Public Works teams are busy with that. And then, of course, the bus shelters and the trail work, all of that's lovely. I also appreciated that was considered, especially the transportation stuff, was under the community safety umbrella, because often people think that's just like speed limits and police, but having safer infrastructure throughout the city is community safety. For the Meridian barriers, I'm pleased to see that. I think that's a better use of staff time and resources to have those in place to be able to use repeatedly. The homeless intervention list, I have a similar note from when we got this review back in October. especially for the pallet shelters and the outsourcing the downtown mall team. My big note that I have in all caps is what's the opportunity cost? So if we're spending $375,000 on pallet shelters, well, how would that money stretch if we were using it for rapid rehousing programs or for getting people in hotels throughout the year, or spending that money in a different way to address those issues? Same with the clean team. I'm assuming this is still the same company that we looked at in October that's outsourcing this. So what is that cost versus what if we did have these folks in-house and they were just city staff and not contracted out?
We have done the comparison. It doesn't really save us much, and they go further than what we're probably going to be able to deliver.
Okay, so great. But it is still expensive.
Yes.
And so that's kind of my big question is, especially for the pallet projects, like what is that opportunity cost? And is that the highest and best use of those dollars? Will that go the farthest? Not to mention all of the logistical details, if that's something that we want to expand. That's kind of still a red flag for me, is that project.
Okay.
But I'm very pro bathroom. And I know we've talked about that in our internal meetings.
Okay.
Thank you.
Lord and O'Brien, do you have any?
No, I think it's brilliant.
Yeah,
Thank you.
I'm good.
So, Sam, was that?
Yes.
Okay. The next item we have on the agenda is actually now some action items. We have a public hearing for ordinance, a public hearing and ordinance to vacate a natural gas easement. This is in the Belvedere subdivision. Lauren? Hey.
Thank you. Good evening, Mayor, Vice Mayor, and councilors. I'm Lauren Hildebrand. I'm the Director of Utilities for the city. And just some background on this item. In 2018, the City of Charlottesville acquired a natural gas line easement from New Belvedere LLC. This easement is located within the Belvedere subdivision in Albemarle County. Since the granting of this easement, the subdivision design has been altered and ownership has been transferred to Belvedere Long Holdings LLC. The ordinance proposes to vacate a portion of the existing natural gas easement to allow the lots overlapping the easement to be developed. Basically, what they found is the curvature of the roadway in the new design interferes with what they granted us in the previous easement. And there are currently no natural gas facilities within the portion of the easement to be vacated because we hadn't been asked to install them yet because they hadn't fully developed this area. The current owner requests to have this portion of the easement vacated. Per Virginia Code, a public hearing is required to give the public an opportunity to comment on the proposed conveyance of a property interest. Therefore, staff recommends the approval of the ordinance and the deed of vacation. We also ask council to consider waiving second reading on this item, and I'm available if you have any questions.
Thank you. Any clarifying questions on this?
So yeah, just to clarify, so right now, basically, there's a piece of land where we have reserved the right to put in a natural gas line if needed, but they're saying we don't need one there anymore. Can we have the land back to build instead?
Right, because the curvature of the road changed in this part of the design.
Are they requesting the easement to be moved, or just let's get rid of it for now?
No, in doing this, they've actually, if you look at the plat that's
Yeah,
on
look
the
at the map.
attachment,
Yeah.
it's in that dotted section of the plat that they're moving it to, because that's where the roadway's going to be. Previously, the roadway had a different curvature.
And we don't need to allot, does this agenda item allot a new easement to that, or we don't need it because it's in the road and so it's fine?
That's correct.
Great,
That's
okay.
correct.
Okay.
Council has to just look at vacations of gas easements.
Okay,
That's
thanks.
correct. Thank you.
Any other clarifying questions? If not, I would If not, I will now open up the public hearing. Anyone from the audience like to speak on this? If not, I will close the public hearing. Is there any further discussion from council? There was a request that we waive the second hearing. If there's
This
no.
is a one reading item.
Oh,
So, okay. I'm happy to move this, unless people.
okay.
Sure.
I move to adopt the attached ordinance vacating a portion of the existing natural gas easement to allow the lots overlapping the easement to be developed. This is item Belvedere subdivision block 4B.
Second.
Second, can we vote? Okay, thank you. Lauren, you have another vacation?
I do.
Yeah,
We
for
like to
natural gas.
combine these.
I wish,
Yeah.
you wish.
So this is a vacation of a natural gas easement in the Old Ivy Road area. And in 1990, an easement for a natural gas line was granted to the city and recorded to serve University Village along Old Ivy Road. The natural gas line was installed that it was basically parallel to an existing water line that's owned by Albemarle County Service Authority. And the current owner, who is GS Old Ivy Property Owner BFR LLC, is requesting the easement be vacated to develop the land. And the ordinance, basically, they granted the city a new natural gas easement to relocate the gas line and continue service to University Ridge. And the natural gas line has been rerouted into the new line, and we've abandoned this existing line that they're requesting be vacated. The ordinance proposes to vacate the former natural gas easement to remove an encumbrance by the owner so he can develop his land. Per Virginia Code, a public hearing is required to give the public an opportunity to comment on the proposed conveyance of a property interest. And again, therefore, staff recommends approval of the ordinance and the deed of vacation. And we also ask council to consider waiving the second reading for this as defined in the ordinance. And I'm available for any questions if you have them.
Any clarifying questions?
Not that it matters, but I couldn't, so their property is located in Albemarle, but they need the easement that runs through Charlotte. I'm just curious. I couldn't figure out if their property was in Albemarle or the city.
It's in Albemarle.
Yeah. Just curious, it doesn't really matter. Just
We
curious.
serve natural gas in the county.
No, I know. I was just
Yeah.
curious what the actual property is and what they're going to do with it.
You're
But that's
all-
separate from this question.
Is this sort of thing, like pretty standard boilerplate, or is this something that's like kind of interesting and new?
No, I would say it's pretty standard.
Okay.
Yeah, where, the previous owner had us put a gas line a long time, this is 45 years ago.
Yeah.
Put a gas line in somewhere. They thought it was the best place because it actually, if you look at the plat, it ran along the property line.
Mhm.
But it's in the way of this new development.
Yeah, okay,
Plans
thanks. No
changed.
questions.
Yeah. Any other clarified questions?
I do have one clarifying question. This actually pertains to the last one, too. The resolutions that are presented to us, the ordinances that are presented to us, talk about there being two readings required. And I'm wondering, I'm looking at page 59, for example, for the last resolution, be it further ordained by City Council, the requirement within City Code Section 2-97 for two readings of an ordinance is hereby waived, and this ordinance shall be effective upon its adoption by City Council without any requirement for a second reading. The same language appears in the resolution and the ordinance that refers to this particular vacating of an easement.
The resolution ordinances are a safe bet. I've just based my information off what was given to me.
So should we, in a sense, revisit the last motion, or is the fact that it passed 5-0 sufficient to give it immediate action?
I would say yes, but maybe there's legal counsel on the line that could confirm
Yeah.
that.
Turn to our city attorney.
Pam should be online. Remy, do you see Pam O'Berry?
Yes, she's in the panelist list.
I'm here. Hello.
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 So did you hear the question that I was raising?
I heard the end of the question.
Okay, so the resolution that we were given is the first one is page 59 of our packet, provides that, and be it further ordained by City Council that the requirement within City Code Section 2-97 for 2 readings of an ordinance is hereby waived, and this ordinance shall be effective upon its adoption by City Council without any requirement for a second reading. Ms. Hildebrand had requested that we waive a second reading, which of course we would ordinarily do by specifically saying that's what we're going to do, and then passing it by at least a 4/5 majority. We didn't actually say that when we passed the first ordinance, though we did pass it 5-0. We didn't specifically say we're hereby waiving the second reading. I guess question number 1 is, do we in fact have to have 2 readings of the ordinance? And the second question is, do we need to go back and sort of reopen the prior matter just to add that additional little fillip to the motion?
Because it's a general ordinance, it can pass by 4/5 and be effective the same night. You don't need to go back. I think the first ordinance, even if you didn't say you were waiving a second reading, the 4/5 vote is enough to qualify it as a pass by 1 reading.
Okay. That was my question as to the one we've already passed by. Now there's no reason not to go ahead in this particular version of the motion to say, and we're going to waive a second reading.
Yeah.
Agreed.
You can certainly, I mean, that's a belt and suspenders approach, you can say that, but if it's a 4/5, it qualifies.
Okay.
Yes. Okay.
Thank you.
Yes, so I can't remember if I opened up the public hearing, but I will open up the public hearing again, just in case. Anyone from the audience would like to speak on this? If not, I will close the public hearing and make sure if there's any other clarifying questions from council. If not, can I get a motion to pass this tonight with 1 hearing?
So moved.
Second.
Okay, can we vote? Thank you. We have another public hearing to approve a right-of-way agreement for 220 West Market Street. Chris?
Yes, good evening, councilors. Chris Engel, Director of Economic Development. This item involves a piece of property at 220 West Market Street owned by Lighthouse Studios, a local nonprofit that works with children in the filming, learning how to make films on their own. They approached us some time ago. There's a piece of property, a piece of city right-of-way adjacent to their property that, for all intents and purposes, appears to be part of their property, but is in fact a piece of right-of-way that has been part of the city right-of-way of Old Preston for a long time. They asked about purchasing or leasing. After checking on the options with that was determined not to be viable at this moment. However, you all were willing to consider some type of agreement, as you see before you. So we have worked with the applicant as well as the attorney's office to come up with this right-of-way agreement, which is a revocable 5-year agreement, so it can be revoked at any time by either party, but it is set up to act in a 5-year term. It basically allows them to use the property. The usable portions of the property is an unimproved parking lot. It's about 5,000 square feet in total, the right-of-way, and you can park 5 or 6 cars in there. They are essentially doing that, and the previous owners of the property have been doing that for some time. So this just attempts to kind of formalize something that has been happening for a number of years on that piece of land. It does require a public hearing. I believe the ordinance is a 1-reading ordinance, but you all can decide how you'd like to handle that based upon your most recent advice. Happy to answer any questions that you have before the hearing.
So by revocable, that means that, does that mean at any point in the 5 years, if we decide that, hey, we've got something we really would prefer to do with this land, we can do that?
That's correct.
Okay.
Does the Does the language specify that it has to stay a parking lot, or could they do stuff to it as long as they undo it when we need it back?
They have to ask permission for anything other than what's there, so it essentially has to stay.
Okay, but there is a system where they could ask permission to do something.
Yes.
It doesn't straight up say there's no way to do something different.
Correct.
Got it. Thank you.
Okay.
So, any other clarifying questions? If not, I'll open up the public hearing for this. If there are no one to speak on this, I will close the public hearing and bring it back to council for motion.
Yeah, I would move that we adopt the attached ordinance approving the agreement with Lighthouse Studios and that we approve this in a single vote.
It appears to be a one-vote motion anyway, according to the resolution.
Okay.
I'll
Okay.
second the motion.
Second. Vote. Motion passes 5-0. The next item is a public hearing and ordinance to approve a revocable license agreement with Hill and Wood Funeral Homes at First Street North for use of a parking space. Chris?
Yes, so this is similar but different. You heard from a member of the public earlier about the Hill and Wood Funeral Service located on First and Market Street, have been there for a long time, operating as a funeral home. They have been using 6 public parking spaces, as was described to you earlier, by putting out little signs indicating funeral service happening and hoping that folks will observe those. And generally, that has likely worked for the most part, but this was brought to our attention a year or two ago in terms of looking for any kind of formal agreement with the city that the funeral home had. We could not find anything, so what you see in front of you tonight is an attempt to formalize an activity that has been happening for many, many years by using those 6 parking spaces that are publicly available, 2-hour parking spaces, generally in front of the funeral service there. As was also described earlier, the funeral service has property with a parking lot, and they have made spaces available in their parking lot when they don't have activities taking place. So essentially, this formalizes a trade, if you will, 6 on-street spaces as needed for viewings and related activities at the funeral home, in exchange for 12 spaces on their lot when they're not having activities at the funeral home. There's a signage mechanism that happens when those spaces are available, and they've been implementing that for some number of years. This obviously has not been in place, and it's before you tonight for a public hearing and consideration of the ordinance that you see attached.
Any clarifying questions on this?
So when you talk about flip signs, so I'm familiar with like the little yellow sandwich boards that we were mentioned earlier, but for the flip signs, are these like a street sign on a pole and they're the kind that are hinged halfway?
Yes.
Okay,
that's
so
exactly
it's
it.
more formal than the yellow.
It is. It's an actual city street sign, and there are a few of these out there. There's one on Market Street, doesn't get used very often anymore for tour bus parking.
Mhm.
It's the same mechanism.
Yeah, yeah.
That would essentially be in place
Okay.
here.
And then let's say someone who's not affiliated with the event at the funeral home parks there, they have the opportunity to tow them? Is that the recourse? Or is it still just kind of a courtesy situation?
I think it's generally a courtesy situation. They could obviously try and engage the CSOs or the police department to, correct that situation, but I don't think in the history of all this happening that that's a common occurrence.
Right, but is there anything in this agreement that says that's now possible?
No. So there's 2 parts to it. On private property, they're responsible for any towing that would
I'm just talking
happen.
about the 6.
And on the street, our towing policies would be the same. So this doesn't change anything related to the street with regard to illegal parking. If somebody's parked illegally, they could still be towed by the police. Hill and Wood can't tow them.
Right, but I mean, I'm saying it's not, does it make it illegal for someone to disobey the flip
It's a good question. I mean, I guess in theory, they could get a ticket, but we have not really explored that with, the enforcement's not really happening now with regard to the yellow signs that are in place.
A little yellow sandwich board does seem more like
Right.
a please don't, whereas a formal city sign seems like a you shall not. And I'm just wondering if that is specifically what this ordinance makes that change, makes it a little more firm.
Up to Chief Kurth.
Hi, Counselor. You're correct, that flip sign, we can't enforce that, but an official city sign, according to this, would be enforceable. So we could ticket it or subsequently or afterwards tow it.
Okay, so now formalizing it with the official city's flip sign, not the sandwich board, means that if the 6 spots are marked for a funeral activity, someone not involved with the funeral parks there, the funeral home could call the city and ask them to come ticket that.
That's
car.
correct.
Okay, thank you.
Other clarifying questions? I will now open up the public hearing for this. Anyone from the public like to speak on this? If,
I shared my comments earlier.
Yeah.
If there's questions that you all would like me to address.
I do have a question.
oh,
Thank you. About how many times a year would this get used?
So it would be for any event at the funeral home. It varies year to year, but about 300 in aggregate, but many of those are concurrent, so it wouldn't be 300 separate events. So sometimes there's a visitation with a funeral immediately following, so it's a longer time frame, but it's all one event congruently, if that makes sense. In terms of separate events, it's probably no more than 125 to 150.
Okay, so, and how long do they usually last?
It does vary greatly. Most of our funerals are 45 minutes in the building. Visitations are usually 2 hours as far as the published time frame. But there is a great deal of variability there depending on the religious customs of the family, just family tradition and so on.
Okay, but about like 120 times a year, these would be set out?
Correct, but a lot of those would be 2 or 3 in a day aggregate as opposed to a third of the year, if that makes sense.
Okay, thanks.
other questions from the comments from the public? If not, I will close the public hearing and entertain a motion from council.
I'm sorry, I have one more question. How long does this agreement last? 5 years. Found it. Thank you.
Yeah, I move the attached ordinance approving the agreement with Hill and Wood.
Second.
Okay. Can we vote? Motion passes 5-0. And thank you. The next item is a public hearing for a resolution for VDOTs for subordination of rights of agreements for Belvedere and Brook Hill.
This one is a little different than the last two. So this one was where the city of Charlottesville has acquired multiple public utility easements to serve natural gas to new homes in the Belvedere and Brook Hill subdivisions in Albemarle County. In the sequence of construction, the gas lines must be installed prior to the roads being paved. And once the road section of the development is complete, the developer seeks the Virginia Department of Transportation's concurrence that they'll take over the public roads into the Virginia Department of Transportation's secondary highway system. So this is an agreement that basically proposes to subordinate, is now using it as a verb or an adjective, the city's easement rights within the rights of way and to VDOT's roadway maintenance. And the natural gas facilities will continue to be owned and maintained by the city even after the easement is subordinated to the Commonwealth of Virginia, and the city's natural gas facilities are required to remain in their present locations. And if any of the streets cease to be part of the VDOT secondary highway system, then the gas line easements in that street will revert to the city. in per Virginia code, as I stated previously, since this is a property interest, we have to have a public hearing. And this is specifically, there are 4 resolutions attached to this for different sections of Brook Hill, specifically it's Belvedere, 3 sections of Belvedere, 2A, 2B, and 5A, and Brook Hill Block 9 through 11. And therefore, staff recommends council approve the resolution and the subordination agreements. I will state that previously, we had done this in a process. I know you don't see these very often from me, but we've done these previously with quit claim deeds, and the city attorney's office and VDOT in the last 6 months got together and decided it'd be more appropriate moving forward to use these subordination agreements in place of that. If there are any questions, I'm available.
Are there actually active gas lines that are being used in these places, or is this just about easement?
No, we serve gas in
We do.
Belvedere and Brook Hill currently.
Okay.
Yes, and this is the last step for VDOT to take over maintenance of the roads.
Any clarifying questions, other questions? If not, I'll open up the public hearing. Any comments from the public? If not, I will close the public hearing and entertain a motion from council.
I move adoption of the attached resolution subordinating the city's easement rights within the rights of way to VDOT's roadway maintenance in the Belvedere and Brook Hill subdivisions.
Second?
Should we vote?
Oh, yeah. Move.
Okay.
Thank you. I think.
Thank you.
You can go.
Appreciate it.
Thank you, Lauren.
That's it. Thank you, Lauren.
So I just asked the mayor if he would indulge me. I forgot to do something during my city manager's report, and I need to let Joe go home. But I wanted to introduce Joe Gilkerson as our new HR director, who's been patiently awaiting for me to let him go home this evening. But I wanted council to be able to set eyes on, we have an HR director in the building again, and Joe has already hit the ground running. He has helped to move the team out of this building into the annex next door. So he got 2 homes for that short period of time. And has already started to hit the ground running, working with the team. So
I
thank you,
thought he
Joe.
was with Healing Wood.
Yeah.
You know?
So, and he has a commute, so Joe, you can go home.
Oh,
Thank you.
sorry.
And then also,
See you early in the morning, right?
yes, you can come in late if you need to.
Safe driving.
And John Maddox is in the gallery. John is right now the managing director of the city attorney's office. As of next month, he will be the city attorney. We were able to get everything, the stars aligned and everything worked out, that he will be sworn in June 4th. June 4th, and then I will have an item for your June 16th council agenda appointing him the city attorney. So he's the managing director. Pam is acting city attorney until all that gets worked out. But wanted to welcome John as well.
Don't want to make any representations.
Yes. Just wanted to welcome him as well. I
You're
forgot, so we had a lot in our report, and I
Yeah,
just
you did.
missed that.
Yeah.
Thank you.
That's awesome.
Welcome to both of you.
Yes, yes. The next item is a resolution to appropriate $150,000 from the Virginia Department of Criminal Justice Services Operation Ceasefire Grant Program, and this is the second reading.
Mayor, councilors, city manager, I'll just go over again real quick. This is the Peregrine system that we've been talking about for the last week. I know we've all met and spoken and answered questions. So just real quick, Peregrine is a software system that is used to fuse all our current systems together, whether that be our Axon body cam system, SAP payroll systems, all those things that we currently have. There was mentioned earlier about our officers' data that would have access to it. That's actually correct. And the reason for that is an accountability measure. So all our systems currently require an officer to put in their unique identifier along with the reason they are accessing the system, similar to like we talked about our Flock system that is audited, whether it be by the PCOB or our internal auditing. They have to have the reason why they're doing it, and then we have to go back and confirm that that's a legitimate reason they are actually accessing that system. So that is correct. With that, I could take any questions.
Any clarifying questions? This is not a public hearing.
Chief, one of the questions I had was, when we looked at the Flock proposal a year or two ago, however long ago it was, we wound up putting on a number of controls that are not typical of the other agencies that have used the Flock system. One, I think it was a 7-day limit on use instead of 30 days or whatever the standard has become. One was no sharing with other groups. Are there other kinds of issues, other kinds of limits or guardrails that we might put on that might address some of the concerns that the folks in the community have raised? I mean, my concern, as I said a couple weeks ago, is I have a lot of concerns about the possibility that our data is going to end up on the wrong end of a subpoena from somebody. Subpoena that may have nothing to do with no access of ours to be able to challenge it. And I'm just trying to figure out how we might be able to give some honor to the legitimate concerns.
So I would be derelict in my duty and to my oath that I stood here and swore in front of all of you that if I was ever issued a court-issued subpoena or search warrant, like everybody here, I would have to honor either one of those. So to answer your question, I just like any of our systems or any information we have, a valid search warrant or a court order, we would have to honor. So I can't.
Well, but
assure that.
you have the option to move to quash. And
yes, that's a lawyer thing.
Yes. Yeah.
I agree with you.
If you are asked for some evidence that you don't believe you have a duty to provide, you have the right to move to quash it. Obviously, you got to ultimately end up obeying the court order, whatever it may be. The bigger concern that recent events in Washington have highlighted for us is the question of whether, number one, whether the holders of the data, Peregrine, let's say, in the case of some of it, whether they would, A, alert us to any such search warrant or process being issued, B, would file any kind of motion to quash on their own, or at least give us some opportunity to file our motion to quash. But of course, the other question is, we would have no way of knowing where to file something like that. I mean, if it's something coming out of a court in California because our data is now being stored on a California server, I'm just kind of thinking out loud and trying to figure out what are all the problems we would have in trying to protect whatever legitimate interests we think we have.
Well, what if let's say, again, use the analogy of Google Workspace. I don't know how you all do your work, but we work on Microsoft 365 or whatever.
It's the same for all our systems that
I mean, someone could go to Microsoft, correct, and do exactly what you're saying analogously with Microsoft or Google or any of these cloud providers. I mean, so I don't see. And then you also mentioned to us the other day that it's Aegis.
It's CJIS compliant.
Yeah.
So when we do I guess I can answer it the best way is when we do an investigation, this is no secret, if we do a search warrant on, and we have the IMEI address of your if we have your cell phone number, we can get the IMEI address of your device, and we could do a search warrant to Verizon, and they will have to, if we do a legal search warrant, Verizon has to provide us all of your data we are asking for. They do, and that's through their stuff. Facebook, Meta. If we suspect a Facebook page may be used in a crime or whatever the case may be, we would do a court. First, we would go. You can just go on. Every one of these companies has a law enforcement dashboard, so you can go on and you do initially a preservation order. We say we are anticipating doing a search warrant. There's a preservation order to preserve all of that data, all that stuff for a period of time, whether it be, again, Verizon, Facebook, Instagram, whatever it is that you have. and then we have to follow that within a certain period of time with a search warrant issued by a judge. So it would be the same thing. Axon, I think they're based somewhere out west, so if somebody wanted our body-worn camera footage from the government and all that data, that's recorded all the time. So they would, it's the same thing. So to answer your question, the same way, they would do it the same way they would do for every other system we have. I think there was a software system talked about Anchor. I mean, our officers are on Anchor team. And so that data is the same, it's the same thing is that the government, if that happens in DC, and to concede, I don't know what's happening in DC. So, but they could do the same thing with that data, which is, from what I understand, social services type data and all that kind of stuff. So I guess we just have to trust that, one, that the CJIS compliant AWS servers that all these companies are using, they're all using AWS, Amazon Web Service, are following the law.
Yeah, I is it okay to weigh in at this point?
Yeah, yes.
Okay. I certainly appreciate the concerns that people have raised. My guess is that if you went to most other jurisdictions or municipalities, this really would not even be a talking point. And so I'm glad that we're thinking through this. I'm glad that we're thinking through Flock. I think the questions that are being asked, for instance, with Flock, it's one of the great reasons why we have a PCOB here. I mean, it's not only because it's a social justice tool, which is essential, but it also is a way of holding us accountable. And it comes in mighty handy when you have something like Flock. You've got another set of eyes. To me, what you've described to me, I keep coming back to Google Workspace. I don't know, people work in different ecosystems. At UVA, they have Microsoft Teams. There's other places that use Slack and other tools, Salesforce. And I realize that, the data that we're putting into this is special, privileged, but you've got similar data at the hospital, the whatever, what do they call that system there? In any event, Epic is the name of it. And so it's got all kinds of medical data in it. And theoretically, that would be open to the very same sorts of concerns that people have about police data. So I get it, and I appreciate the fact that we're asking these questions. I also feel like it feels to me like the system that you're working with now is put together with Band-Aids and bubble gum and for you all to do a more professional, to achieve what you want to do in terms of professionalism. This just seems like the normal kind of tool that any other, would not even be asked about at any other. So I support this. I support it because I want to support you and the force. And I think that we do have the requisite measures in place to prevent abuse. So I'm going to support this.
Yeah. Michael, you have any comments on this?
I mean, I'm in the same place. I mean, I don't have a concern about the local usage. I also think it's an important point that, this isn't something that's really collecting more local data. Maybe it's unreasonable because, you already have these other technology systems. You have cell phones, you have Amazon Ring cameras. But my concern is just, I think there's clearly an industry that is trying to create monopolies on services within public safety nationwide and then monetizing that. That's the business strategy. That's why they're getting private capital investment. And that's part of, building out, surveillance capabilities with that data. Maybe that's unreasonable, but that's where I'm at.
Natalie, you have anything?
Two questions and then some comments. The first is, it was mentioned that if we don't participate in this, then we have to back out from reporting from the Police Equity Center.
No, so so currently we're working with the Center for Policing Equity on looking at disparities in use of force and traffic stop data. What they have asked now is for more data, for more information on use of force. Like, I can tell you that what the use of force was and the actual race of the person that was involved in the use of force. We've given that data. But the big question is, why do these disparities still exist? And in order to get to that why, they have asked for other data, like the GPS location of where that use of force occurred. Well, that's a different system. What was the race of the officer involving that? That's another system. You know, a lot of other things in all these different systems. And so in order to get that, I need somebody to sit down at a computer for an extended period of time and dig through all them and create, like we talked about, an Excel spreadsheet, right? Now, we have looked at, the city manager and I have talked about this to try to find where that person would be or come from. They have to be, one, CJIS compliant, because it's personal and very private information. They would have to take, they would be removed from one assignment or their job now to come sit down and do this. And so we don't have that person to do it.
So it's not impossible, it's just more labor intensive.
I would need another person.
Yeah. And then what questions did whoever in the attorney's office have about the company or the contract?
So I spoke to the city attorney, our city attorney. There was a question, and it was a draft contract. So they asked that the language used in there, it had to do with like liability or something. It referenced California law, and they'd asked that be changed to Virginia law when we finally do the contract, and one other thing. But it was something to do with indemnification.
Got it, okay. But nothing about the larger
No, and I spoke
picture.
to the city attorney's office in Alexandria, who's had this for some time citywide, and they didn't have any concerns with it either.
Yeah. So my thoughts at the moment are that I absolutely understand the need for quality database management. It's something that I do at my job, and I've done it elsewhere. And maybe this totally is just a great, useful piece of software. But there just still seem to be enough red flags for me that, like, this particular moment in history doesn't feel like a good time to wholeheartedly endorse something that makes it easier for, I mean, it's the bug in the feature that we had talked about, where the feature is that it's more useful for our purposes locally. The bug is that it could be more useful for anyone who wants to do something nefarious at the same time. And maybe we don't have the tech skills or the imagination to necessarily come up with that nefarious action, but we've seen what's going on at the federal level, and there definitely are people with those skills and that kind of unfortunate creativity. Medical and office concerns, I think, are very different from potential citizenship or any other kind of data that gets collected in police work. Especially when there's a federal government out there that's hunting people with a fragile citizenship status. And so, you know, I don't know exactly how that would qualify, but it's a concern. And then your example that you used last time about, did this incident involve a bike? Well, there's a feature on Treads where you can select, was a bike there or not?
Right, but
how is that different than?
Because the FR 300s that we fill out doesn't have that, so you're not entering it that way. You have to enter it into the way I understand, you have to enter it into the narrative. And I've clarified that, the same thing, when I've asked my folks just recently, like, I find it hard to believe, like how can I not, I have to have somebody sit down and go through all our systems and say, well, look through the narratives, report by report by report, to see if a bike was involved in this. It just seems very clunky.
But when you go to Treads and click, was there a bike, and then it hits yes, and then you can go back and find that report?
It's my understanding that it's not like a box, a drop-down box that says bike or not, it's pedestrian or not. So you'd have to go into not in the Treads system, but I'm talking in the FR 300 that the officer fills out that then gets put into Treads, if that makes any sense.
But in Treads, there's a box that you check that says, was there a bike or not? And that provides a filter that gives you, here's all of the crash data, and then you check the yes bikes, and then only the bike data is left.
That's not my understanding, but I could follow up with you.
Yeah, because
So is this a feature you want? I'm trying to make.
Treads is a different system, it's for access.
So one of the things that we were told, this was when you were out, was that there's no way to easily look up what are all the accidents that had a bike involved? Except
Oh.
the TREAD software seems to do just that.
And to clarify, there's more than just one system that we would have to look at. So you would look in TREADS, but then you also have our records management system, which is a separate system because TREADS is a state system.
Right.
So our RMS system, you would then have to go in there and you could click and say, okay, anything referring to a bike, and you have to go read that narrative to ensure that it wasn't like a bike that was stolen, that it was involved in an accident. And so it's just multiple systems they'd have to go to make sure the information we're providing is accurate.
But what isn't TREADS, there was a bike involved in an accident? Isn't that answering that question?
Not always. There could also be a police report done if there was a bike involved in another type of situation
And it
involving a
wouldn't
car.
show up on TREADS? For
It
what
depends.
reason?
If an accident report and a police report, so the accident report goes into TREADS, the police report goes into RMS. So you got to go through all of those to try to get all that information,
And why would the accident report and the police report not match?
because they're two different systems. So
But the
police
report verbiage would,
So the police
the
report.
same?
So our records management system doesn't talk with TREADS, which is a state system that we have access to. But they're two different systems, two different companies.
So one of them is read-only and one is you're actually
correct.
entering in. Yeah.
So,
But I can get more technical answers if
Yeah,
you want
I'm
to just
still-
send me send me the question and I'll get you the exact answer.
I'm just still not sure how TREADS would, TREADS is calling from police report data, right?
TREADS is pulling from police accident report data. So there's two different there's a lot of different reports we do. If there's an accident involving a car and a bicycle, okay, then that's what's called an FR 300, an accident report. That's a state form that goes into that state system that we have access to, right? If there's a bicyclist riding down the street and hits into a pole or something other than a car, an FR 300 wouldn't be written because it's not involving a vehicle, but a police report would be written, and that would go into RMS. So to provide the accurate data, I'd have to go through all of those different systems.
So TREADS pulls from the first one, but not the second one?
That's
Because a
correct.
car was not involved?
That's correct.
Okay, but if we needed to know how many cars and bikes were involved, that would be available. That's a report that TREADS could pull.
Maybe, I'd have to look at that.
Okay. Yeah, it just feels like one of those things where they get a bunch of money, they try and seed it in communities, we become dependent on it, and then we then have to pay for it, and then also maybe the federal government does something kooky. If this was a different administration, I think it would be a lot easier to say, let's be that guinea pig, or be in that class of guinea pigs of kind of earlier adopters. But I know it's gonna make, record keeping and searching, not more difficult than it is now, but the same as it is now. And I think that's gonna I think that's where we have to keep it for now. Maybe in a couple of years we revisit after they have more of a company history and we see what happens. We have a little more of a narrative, but
It's been around for some time.
2021.
Yeah.
So it's not like it's been around for decades or, it's part of the tech boom that's happening. So it is still kind of early adoption.
Yeah.
The software, is it Alexandria that's been using it?
Alexandria uses it citywide, Loudoun County
For how
uses it.
long?
It's my understanding, probably about 3 years. Alexandria, Loudoun County, Fairfax County, UVA.
What is UVA?
They're just starting it up now.
Okay.
Like this week or like?
I don't know. It's my understanding they're in conversations whether to use it just police department wide or university wide. That's the
Yeah, I mean, they're having an interesting relationship with the federal government at the moment as well, so.
So my comments on this is that, I had a lot of questions when we met, and, I would have concern if it was more like the Flock system now. Like, I probably would not support the Flock system if it was to come to us now. For something like this kind of a record management system, allow staff to be more efficient and for you to be able to respond to our queries and queries from the public, I will support this. So, any other comments on this?
I continue to wrestle with this. And on the one hand, You know, I don't want to say I've made my living doing this exactly, but a large part of what I end up doing is trying to pull data from disparate sources and trying to figure out how they fit together, if they fit together, and looking for, for patterns. And going back, when I started practicing law, we used to do it with file cards on the floor, and you would spread out all the
Not
file
far from
cards, and then you would look for patterns and so on. And I think we can all be glad that the process of computerization of record keeping and so on has made that pretty much old hat. And I don't want to get in the way of that. On the other hand, as I've said before, I continue to have real troubles with, and I'm frankly trying to decide whether I am being hypersensitive. Before the last 4 months, I would have said absolutely I was being hypersensitive. Now I'm not quite sure whether I'm being hypersensitive. Ultimately, I think let me ask you this: if we do this for a year, at the end of the year, for whatever reason, either because of problems we've had or problems other folks have had, we decided we don't want to do it. What happens to the data that has been created in the meantime? It's being stored on their server someplace.
My understanding, it's our data. When we're no longer in contract with
Oh,
them,
it's
it's
deleted.
wiped. Yes,
Okay.
correct. I think that was one of the questions that was.
I think that's right, yeah. And, we can always sit there and say, well, how do we know they're really going to do that? Well, how do we know any, at some point, I guess I have to assume that absent some very much unforeseen circumstance, I have a hard time imagining that the data from Charlottesville, Virginia is going to be of national import. That's not to say that it won't be of import to, perhaps some individuals here, but if I'm looking for reasons to think that somebody is going to go after Charlottesville, Virginia's police data the same way that Elon Musk and his boys went after the Social Security data and so on, I just have a hard time seeing why that is a likely outcome. And I'm kind of inclined, although with a lot of reservations, to say, give it a try.
The grant's only going to cover 1 year, sir. So
Yeah.
it'll come back to this body.
I mean, it's something that I've been struggling with really for the last couple of weeks as I've tried to figure it out, and I've talked to a number of folks who know a lot more about the computer security issues than I do, and I think that the impression that I've gotten from most of them is there are a lot of questions and a lot of concerns, but the concerns and the questions don't come down to the software as much as to the humans. And I don't know how to design a way that I want you to do your business that tries to account for the possibility that somebody completely remote to this operation is going to turn out to be operating in bad faith. And I don't think I can reasonably, I don't see how I can live in a world where I'm always worried that somebody out there is perhaps going to get over on me. At some level, I feel like I've got to have trust enough in me and frankly in you to figure that number one, although we can never we can never eliminate the possibility that somebody will do something underhanded, sneaky, illegal, whatever. Heck, in my line of the work, that's
why there's consequences.
That's every day. I don't want to live in a world, or I don't want to choose to live in a way that assumes that I'm looking under every rug to see what might crawl out. And that's not the way I want to go about this. And I want to have trust in the folks, in us, in you, in the way that the system will be working, and figure that for the most part, the problems, whatever may be generated in Charlottesville is not likely to rise to the level of sufficient national concern that we have reason to think that we're going to get into trouble. So I'm grappling with it, and I know I'm sort of rambling as I'm talking out loud here, but I'm kind of working around to the position of saying I'm inclined to vote for it and say, give it a try.
I think it's something that it's the double-edged sword of technology and these phones we carry around with us.
I am not a technology fan,
it's-
sir, and I will tell you, I think the questions that you all are asking are thoughtful, and I appreciate them.
Yeah, it's like what wonderful things come from our phones, and then, learn that these AI, Gemini, or whatever on your Android phone uses all this power to, answer a simple question. And you're like, well, okay, that's not real a good use of resources. But anyway, I think everything, it is something we're having to face with every technology decision, and particularly with the concerns people have raised about nefarious actors, It's hard, so I don't criticize anyone that disagrees.
Me neither.
And this is a larger conversation, but I think it bears mentioning the belief or trust in larger systems, when often those systems are not set up to care for people. In a minority scenario, or think of early tech when it was written, even existing tech, it doesn't recognize darker skin tones, because darker skin tone people didn't write the software, and so things weren't taken into consideration. Or the tech bro ecosystem that, and this goes back to even before tech, when color photography was being developed, it didn't show darker skin tones accurately because they weren't considered. And so people who are writing this kind of software are coming from a certain background, and they have their certain biases, and they're supporting a certain system that has gotten them to the place where they go. And not having to worry about checking around corners or looking under rugs. Try being a woman walking at night. Or again, this is not relevant necessarily to this conversation, but to the broader instance of who is creating the systems that we are being asked to trust. And so that, again, I'm getting there's just too many red flags in this particular moment for me to support this kind of overarching data aggregation.
I respect that.
Sounded like there was a motion, or potential motion.
Me?
No, just from where everyone's perspective.
Yeah, I'm happy to move the question, read the motion. Are we
Please.
at that point, sir? And we'll see what people say. Maybe if I can find it. I move the resolution to appropriate $150,000 from the Virginia Department of Criminal Justice Services Operation Ceasefire Grant Program.
I'll second the motion.
Okay, can we vote? Okay, the motion passes 3-2. Thank you. The next item we have is general business. It's the second presentation of the 2025 ADA Transit Update Plan. Endorsement by resolution is requested.
I'm sure the mayor would be happy if we started.
Thank you so much, sir.
Yeah.
Good evening.
Good evening.
Good evening, council. We're here to present the ADA transition plan. We've been working on this for quite a while.
Yeah.
We went in front of you last month to talk about it, to go through some of the edits, to relieve some citizen concerns. And we're here tonight. Charlie Seibold, Kevin McDonald from Precision Infrastructure Management, they've been our partner this whole time doing this transition plan. They're here as well to answer any questions and to take care of any concerns that we have. With that, I hand it over to Charlie. Thank you so much.
So is this the same thing that we saw?
It's similar, but we did some changes. We're just going to move through it as quick as we can to get to your questions.
And you're just looking for an endorsement?
Well, a little.
Okay.
Yeah, it's just an endorsement, it's not an adoption.
Yeah, thanks everyone for having us again. We appreciate the opportunity to answer any questions and present. A lot of the information in this slideshow here is repetitive from what we've seen already, so we will move through it very quickly in respect of your time. Kevin McDaniel here has worked with Precision Infrastructure Management. He's also served as an ADA coordinator for other cities before, a deep background in the ADA, and he can help offer any advice as well, or answer any questions you might have. So I'm going to turn it over to Kevin here to go through this presentation, and yeah, please interrupt whenever with any questions you have.
Good evening, council members. Thank you for having us. We really appreciate it. Wanted to take the opportunity to clear up any questions or answer any questions about the ADA transition plan and the processes we use to collect the data and develop the implementation plan. I wanted to give you an opportunity. We talked about this over there while you were all working on other very important items, and it was a very interesting debate about how much of the presentation that you all want to see. I'm happy to walk through the entire presentation. I'm also happy to just get right to some of the questions that we collected since the hearing last month.
Yeah, is the presentation all of this?
Yes, sir.
Well, I don't think we need that.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
I know it's late, but we're here for the public, and this is of public importance.
Yes, sir. Okay.
But we've seen this before, right?
You've seen about at least half of it. Yes, sir. Yes, sir. So I wanted to first just kind of talk about who our company is and my role in the company and our work with Charlottesville. As Charlie said, my name is Kevin McDaniel. I'm the former division chief for disability services out of Jacksonville, Florida. I was a former state ADA coordinator for the state of Colorado. My job has been to manage very large lawsuits. At the time when Jacksonville was sued, we were the largest disability rights lawsuit in the country. We were since trumped by LA and San Diego with their homeless lawsuit. It was blocking the sidewalks. So I've spent most of my time focused on managing $100 million, $120 million, $200 million projects. And what those all call for is culture change, essentially. There's too many problems in trying to implement ADA-related changes to policies, to buildings, to technologies, to just the way we do business for us to get everything right every time. So my background is focusing on changing those cultures, working with the organization, first identifying what our minimum legal requirements are, what is our community telling us about where these barriers are, where they're encountering them, how can we strategically align with the organization, and what's our organizational capacity to complete this work. Those are our four big pieces of information that kind of help us understand what is possible, what can we do. So our company is focused on working with governments to do this. We're field tested. We have a very significant field testing criteria, and we're very data driven. We have options for customers. We can collect through AI. We can collect through field assessment technicians. We have a lot of capabilities, and we spend a lot of time focusing on identifying these barriers and developing plans for municipalities to change their culture and slowly implement these changes. We also serve as an assessment company, but also an implementation company. So on the front end, we have the capabilities to assess those barriers, both physical, digital, and programmatic access. And then we have the ability to follow up and help with some of the work as well. So we're a full service company from the beginning to end, and we spend all of our time managing lawsuits, complaints, and transition plans. That's our background. So I'll first just do some high level, very quickly, on some of the overall findings in the city of Charlottesville. We examined 167 miles of right-of-way. I won't read all of this. You can, it's on the presentation. We've made it also available for anyone in the public. We assessed 42 facilities, 30 parks, 1 digital assessment, which included the main website, charlottesville.gov, and 30 documents associated with it as a sample size. In that one website, we assessed 29 templates, and so basically what that means is when, as a technologist, when you're implementing technology, you have to assign different types of templates or create templates for content managers to use. So when we do this assessment, we look at all the available templates to try to understand how customers are interacting with different types of technologies that you have. So we assessed 29 templates. The WCAG standard is 10% of your templates, and I think we exceeded that. We also reviewed 8 departments for programmatic access. So programmatic access is essentially a review of your policies and procedures. Our facility assessment teams and our right-of-way teams did the assessment on your physical stuff. I did the assessment on your digital website, and our programmatic access reviews were done by our programmatic access professionals. And essentially what that means is departments bring us their policies and procedures. We review them for accessibility in the broader context of programmatic access. So if someone has trouble reaching the hand sanitizer, we look at the policies to see how would we serve that person if we can't move the hand sanitizer. So that's kind of like, how do we deliver service in general? So 8 departments submitted their information, and we reviewed the 8 departments and developed a maturity model based on that. And I'll get into that in a little bit. First, before we get into the assessment, this is actually the part of the presentation we wanted to use to clear up. We had some questions from the last presentation. One, there was a question about the use of PROAG over the 2010 ADA standards. PROAG was promulgated by the Department of Justice, by the Access Board in 2023. We have very, very, very high expectations that it'll essentially become it'll be an amended version of the Americans with Disabilities Act. It's already been adopted and promulgated as a rule for the Department of Transportation and some other like General Services agencies. The General Service Agency and some of their divisions. So we expect, just like the website guidelines have now become subpart H of the ADA, that PROAG will also do that. So it's a best practice throughout the country to use PROAG over the 2010 standards, because we can anticipate that those will change in the next 5 to 10 years. So we were trying to help you avoid the cost of having to go back and do this again, and just getting right to what the federal regulations are saying. So that's one clarification.
Can I
Yes,
just
sir.
ask in a nutshell version, what's the difference between the PROAG and the 2010?
More through the mayor, through Mayor Wade, more access essentially. As an example, 2010 standards call for 36-inch wide sidewalks, which essentially, I think it's every 100 feet requires some type of refuge for individuals who use mobility devices. The PROAG standards give you 48 inches, and you also get an area refuge more frequently. I can't remember the exact number, but it clarifies things like the 48-inch wide sidewalk over the 36-inch wide sidewalk gives users with disabilities the ability to maneuver, turn around, or move out of the way. Another example of PROAG is clarifying when an accessible pedestrian signal is required. The 2010 standards essentially on this issue talk about access in general, but don't clarify when do we add an accessible pedestrian signal. The PROAG standards clarify when that public safety is the priority. So they're an improvement of the 2010 standards, I would say maybe by 5 to 10%. They're not a huge jump, but they are a small one. And so one of the questions was, why are we going with PROAG and assessing for 48-inch sidewalks over 36-inch sidewalks when all that's required is 36-inch? Is because we reasonably expect that it will become 48 inches in the near future. Best practice, yes, sir.
Thank you. Sorry to interrupt.
And to follow up, by becoming 48 inches in the near future, does that mean that 36-inch sidewalks would no longer be okay? It would be required to upgrade all of them to 48?
I would anticipate that the 36-inch sidewalks they don't have a grandfather or safe harbor clause in the ADA like most people think. I'm sorry, through the mayor. They don't have a safe harbor clause necessarily, but what the ADA calls for is whenever you make changes to the facility or to the right-of-way, they need to meet the most recent standards. So us assessing for the 48-inch standards up front allows the city the opportunity to plan these changes on their own time versus having to be reactionary to any new changes or a lawsuit or whatever the case is.
Okay,
Yes, ma'am.
thank you.
Yes, ma'am. In our assessment, we identified about 3,100 curb ramps. That note is on the board because there was a question about the number of curb ramps that were identified in previous assessments. I think I saw the number at like 200. And I can only just say that we can't speak to why that was the number in the first assessment because we weren't part of it. But using our proprietary technologies and our staff, who this is all they do, we identified 3,100. So I can't clear that up much more, but I know that our field assessments, who we trust to go out and do this every single time, whether it's in Fresno or Pittsburgh or here, we expect them to go out and follow a very set of procedures and collect the data according to the best practices that our company's established. So I can't speak to why we found so many more, but we did. That is the number. The Title III piece, advocates priority ranking. Okay, so another question that came out of the transition plan was there were questions about Title III versus Title II. Title I and Title II are applicable to governments. Title I is, of course, the EEOC. I don't have to explain that to everyone here. Title II is our public access. Title III is for private businesses. The reason why Title III is included in this transition plan is because it gives us a template to mitigate risk and try to anticipate what barriers should be prioritized over the others. So in Title II, there isn't any clarification for priorities because the expectation is that they just get done. So we then have to rely on where do we have some type of precedent that we can use. And Title III specifically says that you prioritize the route first, then the bathroom, then the entrances out, and the parking lot, or excuse me, the parking lot's third. And the reason why is because that's how people with disabilities interact. It's how all people interact with your services. They need to be able to get into the parking lot. They need to be able to get to the door. They need to be able to get into the bathroom. They need to be able to go ask for help in case they can't access other parts of your building. And Title III creates that precedent. So we're not referring to Title III in the plan itself as the law that we're following. We're using it as a precedent to establish a prioritization matrix. So we are clear that this is a Title II entity. We just wanted to clarify that because we know we got some comments from the public about it. And then the last two things on the screen here. Pedestrian right-of-way, just want to make sure we explain that. Pedestrian right-of-way means anything, sidewalk, right-of-way, curb cut, any place where the public can access that we have control over, that's our pedestrian right-of-way in this context. And then finally, parks and facilities, those are broken up into two separate categories in the plan. But the reason why is because I have found that in my work in the government, I worked for parks and facilities for 5 years, they operate under a different type of governance. So and this is just my experience, I'm not speaking for Charlottesville, but I'm just trying to explain why we came to that conclusion. Typically what I've found is that Public Works can make plans based on their CIP, based on federal funding, based on long-term plans, where parks are typically more reactionary to places like city council, to the public, where am I going to get a park, where is it safe, that kind of thing. It's much harder to allocate like a future a hard timeline, hard deadlines on places like parks because there's so many other political constraints involved. So the best thing we do is assess all of these things as facilities, and then we put them on separate tracks to allow them to manage themselves effectively, instead of trying to put them all in one place because they're not managed by one place in most cases. So that's why those two items are separated. And then I had one other piece that I had. The voting piece. We also got a question about voting. We inspected all city facilities, so any place that you are holding any type of voting at a city facility, it was inspected. The reason why it is not specifically called out is because voting is a program in itself. It requires programmatic access. Just like emergency management, whenever we rely on places like churches, schools, county facilities, other places to have services for us, we can't control what they do. We can't make the school board go and repair their buildings because we say they're not accessible. Because when we need those facilities, we're going to use them because safety is the only thing that trumps the ADA, safety and the greater good. So We inspected those as city facilities, but it doesn't mean that they're not part of a transition plan. What they should be looped into is a greater programmatic access plan to ensure that where we are going to come up short because of facilities, like for example, here in the council chambers, the slope here is very, it's out of compliance. That's going to be a difficult thing to fix. That's it's part of the foundation. I can feel it, right? That's going to take some time. So how do we ensure that people who come into the council chamber still have access to it? We do things like provide them online access. We allow them to call in. Whatever it is, providing the meeting agendas, we're providing that additional access. So that's why things like voting, emergency management, where we're relying on partners that we don't have control over, we want to make sure that we're approaching this from how do we ensure these services are delivered properly regardless, and then focus on the facilities improving access individually as we would like in a CIP, a long-term plan. So that's kind of how we approach this, and I wanted to just clarify that. Also the same for transit. That was the last note I had. So with that said, Charlie, do you want me to keep going? Does anyone have any questions? Because I just want to make sure I got all that. Did I get everything, Paul, on that one? Okay. So just some clarifying things there. I know Charlie's done this presentation, so I'll just say very quickly, we have a I don't think any company out there is going to collect better data than us. We're very efficient. We follow all the industry best practices, and in technology particularly, we go above and beyond the best practices to ensure that we go beyond the statistically significant sample of technology to test. We do the same in the field. We have a 16-point inspection process, collects a lot of data from vertical height displacements to the location of objects protruding in the hallway. Everything in the building we're going to catch, and if we have access to the policies and procedures and all your technology, we're going to catch that stuff too, most of it. So we have a very efficient process. Through the 167 miles of right-of-way, we noted 48,000 barriers or so. Nothing to panic about. This is very common. Infrastructure is old. Even though the ADA is, you hear the line all the time, it's 35 years old, it's 36 years old, we can do better. The thing is whenever they passed this, they didn't really think about what a major infrastructure challenge this was going to be. Just like a technology infrastructure challenge, trying to change all your technology, it's a culture change, it's an organizational change, and 70% of those fail. So this is a major infrastructure project that takes time. 48,000 barriers is not bad. It's common. We have some examples here of right-of-way findings. I won't bore you all with these, but these are just some of the examples of ponding, less than 4 feet of clearance, not having an access to a curb ramp, some more ponding, and in the top left image there is vertical height displacement example, and that's trip hazards, risk mitigation strategy to fix those. I know you all have seen this slide, so I'll just keep going unless you slow me down. Essentially, we have a breakdown here of all the barriers. The pie chart represents what those barriers represent out of all the right-of-way findings. And then our next breakdown of costs here talks about the cost of those barriers. So whenever I mentioned earlier that we're a full-service company, the reason why we have the ability to talk about alternative maintenance activities, or AMAs, is because we have the patented processes that allow us to reuse the concrete, to cut concrete in ways that other companies can't. So, and I'm not advocating that it's our company necessarily here, that's not what we're here for, but I'm just saying that if you use innovative solutions to try to work through the costs, you see a reduction of about 20 or 30% in general on all of these right-of-way costs. And that's because we're not pouring concrete every time we have to fix vertical height displacement or replace a curb ramp. We're reusing the concrete to pull it back down to spec.
And so this is like if there is a difference in height between two panels of sidewalk, you grind down the taller one instead of replacing that part of the sidewalk.
Through the mayor, yes, ma'am. Yes, ma'am. In our facility assessment, again, won't spend a lot of time here, but as I said, we have a very comprehensive process. Our surveyors work in teams. Some of the equipment they use are very simple things, like their measuring tape, their door weight, their levels. But essentially, they're following a checklist that the DOJ has provided and that our company has improved upon. In the 42 facilities, we identified over 2,600 barriers. Again, common. It's not the end of the world. It's, I think in Jacksonville in our lawsuit, we had something like a couple 100,000, so this is it's a common thing. Have some more examples here of the types of things we found. The protruding object doesn't meet the reach range. A front approach required for a bathroom, perhaps not any insulation there. dispenser out of range for the person who's using the toilet, and then having a transfer platform that's too low is creating an unstable condition. Just some examples here. And then we have, in this next slide, we have a list of the types of barriers that we identify in these assessments and the makeup of where those barriers are throughout all of the city's owned properties. And then here's our costs. In that cost, we typically assess for a low cost and a high cost, but we've kind of found, and this was also a preference of Charlottesville, that we go with the high cost because when you consider maintenance and other activities, like, it's like this. We found in Jacksonville, we had $90 million worth of curb cuts to fix.
You said 9 or 90?
90. 90, sir. Yes, sir. 90 million, and that took 4 years to find that money. And when we finally found the money, when we put the money out there for the contractors, we were getting fail rates of about 50%. So they're spending $10,000 a curb ramp, and those curb ramps are coming back broken. They're not working, and we're having to go out and redo them again and again. So one of the things that you have to get there. And by the way, because I can see it in your face, we got through that essentially by me bringing just a big picture, meeting all the contractors and bringing a picture and saying, I want it to look like this. Forget the requirements, just make it look like this picture. And then the rates dropped to like 10%. So it was good. And then we applied the standards, just make it simple. But we go with high cost because we know that there are talent constraints, both in the private and in public. This stuff takes a lot of time. Like I said, it's an infrastructure project. You have people who don't know how to fix websites, don't know how to lay down curb ramps correctly. I'm not saying Charlottesville, in general, throughout America. And so it takes time to train those vendors. It takes time to train staff to stick to certain policies and procedures. So we go with the high cost because we know in general, given inflation, we're probably going to end up on the high cost on a lot of things. Not us in particular for facilities, but just contractor costs in general. Our parks assessment, we identified 30 parks with 1,000 barriers. Same collection process, some more examples: no accessible route, no knee clearance, non-compliant cross slope on the access lane, which means that when someone gets out of their vehicle, they lower their lift, they get off on an uneven surface, they can fall out of their wheelchair. So making sure those are sloped properly. Ensuring the pipes have insulation and making sure things can be reached if you're a person with a disability who uses a mobility device. And just another slide here breaking down the types of barriers we found in the parks. And all of this, of course, is included in the transition plan. Same thing, we went high costs here given the inflation and talent constraints. Finally, well, no, we have one more after this. I'm going quick, I apologize. One website, 30 documents, approximately 2.5 million PDF barriers. And this is what I kind of mean by not letting the number of the barriers identified be the thing that's like, okay, what do we do about this? It's very common because everything is an error in the ADA space. If there's a parsing error, if there's a problem with the document, if one part of the concrete is off, it's technically a barrier. So we try to look at things holistically, like how do people access the services, how accessible is it in general. This particular finding of those 30 PDFs, those 2.5 million barriers, could probably be fixed in about an hour or two. It's like little things, but you have to be able to get the staff to the point where they understand it, 244 barriers on the city's website. Didn't find it particularly difficult to navigate, though. I thought the website looked really good, so it was in good shape, but we had some barriers there. And as I said, talking about the programmatic access, so we talked earlier about council chambers. We talked about one of the options to ensure programmatic access. One of the things you look for when you look at the presentation here would be for the individuals watching it, do they have access to captions? Do they have access to sign language interpreters, that kind of thing? That's programmatic access. So it's looking beyond the facility, looking beyond the technology, beyond the gate, the point of sale, I would say. It's looking at how the person's interacting with the government. We're just trying to ensure that all people are included, whether or not we can get to full accessibility or not. We want to make sure we create ways for them to request help. The best example of this is one of our lawsuits in Jacksonville was over our $1 billion courthouse, and had an individual from the community come out and say, hey, I can't get in. You should be putting automatic door openers in this. You should do this and that. I did all the things she asked me to do, put the door openers in, I still ended up getting called down there to the courthouse with the news cameras in front of my face and her upset. And I'm like, what's going on here? And she said, well, you put automatic door openers in, but I have MS. I can't press the automatic door opener. So it's just that, oh, okay. So I should have looked at the policies to ensure that the security guard would open the door for her, or we put in, just automatic, you don't have to press the button. So the point is just making sure that knowing the point of the story is just that we're never going to be accessible to every person on earth. We just can't be. Like, even with the best technology, with the best standards, that's why the provision of the ADA that requires that lifeline is so important, and that's what programmatic access is looking for. Do we have the policies and procedures in place to ensure that people receive service regardless? Talked about Title III already, so I'll skip that one. Some of the things we identified: lack of consistent reasonable modification procedures, inconsistent effective communication policies across departments, and insufficient accessibility and emergency management communication and digital content. Again, this is not a knock on anyone who has spent any time on these plans. This is a big law, and it essentially it kind of permeates into everything we do. So there's no such thing as perfection. There's just intent, right? So some of the recommendations that we put in were, first, to adopt a citywide digital accessibility policy. That's actually the federal law beginning in 2026. So WCAG 2.1 is the digital technology standard that we want to be aspiring to, because it's pretty much law in the next 18 months. Train all ADA staff on ADA reasonable modifications and communication standards. This is, again, just making sure that the frontline people understand their obligations as representatives of the city of Charlottesville, knowing that if someone requests an accommodation, it's not a call they ignore. They take the next step to make sure that person gets service. And then developing compliance requirements in our procurement contracts, because almost all of this gets shaken out in procurement. What you end up happening is you have some things you can do locally. You can fix your content management. You can move trash cans out of the way. You can move the sanitizer down. But for the major construction projects, you still have to rely on vendors to do a lot of the work. And if you don't have the right provisions put into your purchase contracts, you're just going to keep getting bad work. So a major recommendation would be ensuring that you have compliance requirements for your facilities, right-of-way, technology, and any programs or services offered on behalf of the city of Charlottesville. To do all of this, it all seems like impossible, because it is part of the city's entire organization. It's the governance of the city. We suggested and proposed to Paul and his team in the city of Charlottesville a maturity model that essentially is a policy framework at scale. When you think about a policy development tool, you have 5 stages of policy development in general. Everybody has something different. I got corrected on that in Seattle one time. But everybody's got an internal process. But you have 5 stages. You have an undefined problem that you need to figure out what's the solution, what's the problem, and what are the possible solutions. You have a defined policy where you're starting to put those solutions into action and identify which ones are best. You have an implemented policy that is then now the policy in practice, and then you have the managed stage where you're getting feedback on your policy and making improvements where you're seeing problems. And then the final stage, the best practice, your policy is being modeled in other cities, counties, and states throughout the country. A maturity model does those 5 things at scale in all areas of government. By applying the maturity model, it essentially allows you to get feedback from your subject matter experts throughout the city, giving them giving you their best estimate of where they are in this initiative, and then completing a second survey, a resource survey that communicates to Paul and his team and to Mrs. Marshall exactly what resources are needed from city leaders to get some of the things done that this transition plan calls for. Through that resource survey and the maturity model, those recommendations are then taken back to the Disability Committee, and then their recommendations are taken to city leadership. From city leadership, we now have what are the resource needs to move this bar forward, maybe 5% per year. It's what we've seen in other states and cities who have used it. And what resources can we make available to make improvements on certain parts of this model? Those resources are then implemented. The survey is repeated again in 2 years, and you get a new score. You run this policy model over and over again, you're going to get between 2 and 5% improvement year over year. Something that's measurable, that you can share with the Department of Justice, the Department of Labor, or whomever else is interested in your policies. You can demonstrate measurable progress to those outcomes, to the end goal, which is full access. So with that said, I think I had another slide on there. I can talk more about the maturity model, but I think that Paul and his team have spent a lot of time with it, and I think it's fleshed out in the plan. But essentially, that's what it is. It's a 5-step policy improvement tool at scale, because we're talking about a lot of policies and a lot of departments and a lot of people that need to be retrained very slowly, incrementally, working within the organizational capacity, right? So with that said, I think that's what I have here. We've provided access to the plan, which is published on charlottesville.gov now, Paul. Certainly happy to have any questions, and I'm sorry if I went too long. Sorry.
No, you're fine.
I just want to cover real quick. I know there was concern from the community. CAT stops are in the right-of-way report. So I've heard that we didn't cover them. They are in the right-of-way report. They can be looked up and seen right there.
Okay.
So just for like semantic clarification, it's called the ADA transition plan, but it's more like the ADA audit and inventory, because what we do next is we use this to come up with our work plan, right? We're not getting the work plan tonight.
Yes, through Mayor Wade. So, as I said, you have let me think, 4 or 5 different major initiatives here. One is your public facilities, which is, I assume, Public Works, right? So they've got to develop a plan and align it with CIP, right? And identify what city resources are available. You have the Parks Plan, which essentially is, in my experience, and if I'm wrong here, I apologize, I'm happy to make changes to it, is more reactionary because they're more public-facing, right? Then you have the technology piece. They've got all these other pieces involved. The great debate we heard here tonight, cybersecurity, privacy, AI. And so you're going through all these purchasing decisions trying to replace any inaccessible technology, and you're working within this very narrow frame of like, these are the boundaries. So they've got a very small pipe to get through to get actual technology that's accessible because they have so many other requirements. So that's got to happen as contracts are renewed, and it's a very narrow window. The programmatic access thing requires retraining of employees. It requires policies to be developed, but what you don't want to do is create a shock to the system. You don't want something like the DOJ lawsuit in Jacksonville where we had to find $200 million in 36 months and it cost us 10% of our workforce. It was bad. We lost our pension system, but we had to find that money. So you don't want shocks to the system. They're going to cut off services where you're directing $30 million to just improving all policies, and now we're losing other critical services. So you want to work within the capacity of the organization. So your policies and procedures are running on a maturity model. Your public works and facilities are running more on a CIP scheduled model. Your parks is working kind of on an iterative project plan because they really are. It is really another iteration every year almost. And then your technology is, they're running through the Scrum process. They're project managers, right? They're just taking it through what works. So there's a lot of moving parts there. And so we provide the framework in this plan, and the maturity model provides the broader framework of the more complicated pieces, which are the program development, policy changes, technology. That's the more complex part of this. The facilities and right-of-ways that's something that public works directors can handle and do like all the time. And I'm not saying that they should here. I'm just saying that that's something we're very comfortable with that they do. Parks directors, again, they're taking their lead from the city manager, from the mayor, from city council. And so you can't really tie them to a hard schedule because their priorities shift so often. So there's 4 or 5 moving parts here. So we didn't provide a schedule for public works or for parks because we wanted to provide them flexibility, but we did provide a schedule for the more complicated parts, which is the culture change initiative of the whole thing, which is changing how the organization sees the ADA, how they use their resources, and what employees are expected to know and be obligated to do.
So
Thank you.
You've reviewed a lot of plans, sound like different localities around the United States.
Yes, sir.
What do you see as Charlottesville's biggest, you've identified a lot, we've been aware of that. What, if there's 1 or 2 things that, it's like, well, this is probably some major issues for Charlottesville, what would it be?
It would probably be the physical and right-of-way. That's going to be the most it's going to be the most expensive part of this. Because how many curb cuts did we say, Charlie? 3,100 curb cuts, so that's 31 million if you go by traditional costs, $10,000 a curb ramp or so. So that one's going to be a big one. And then facilities, I think we found, what was it, 48,000 barriers with facilities? You can probably estimate those at between
48,000 for right-of-way.
48,000 for right-of-way.
Lower facilities.
Lower facilities. Okay. Yeah, so those are going to be the most cost, those are going to be the most expensive options. The more difficult things to change, though, is the policies and the culture of the organization. Perfect example of this is like, so when you create a Word document, and you create a Word document, we bring employees onto the city and we say, well, your job is to create these documents. We assume that they know how to use Word properly because it's a common tool. But in fact, there's actually a few steps you have to take to do it correctly. So, and that's just like one piece. So making sure that staff have the ability to do that and they're trained on the front end, that's making sure that leadership is aware of the initiative, middle managers know what their responsibilities are, employees continue to do it, and that they were trained in the first place in orientation. So that culture change piece is going to take time, but that's where I think the maturity model is going to be so powerful for the organization. The state of Washington, state of Colorado now use the maturity model that we gave them. They use it for almost all of their programs and services. Every agency in the state of Washington was directed by the governor to create a maturity model for their program that wasn't even related to ADA. So it's a very powerful tool once it's in place because it puts your ADA office in a position of managing with a light touch. They're allowed to focus on the small details because that's where the biggest changes happen, but manage the big details with a light touch and trust the experts in their departments to actually give them the information they need to make recommendations to the city manager and to the mayor. Yes, sir.
Yeah, one thing in general that we often see, the most difficult piece of any of this is just consistent attention given to the problems and the barriers. So it seems Charlottesville has made great strides. It seems that there's lots of interest in the council, definitely in the public, for ADA accessibility. So, we would encourage you to just continue with that tradition now. It's not going to be 6 months. It's not going to be a year when all of this is magically fixed. That's part of the whole point of this plan is to give you that framework to work on it consistently. But that only lasts as long as the attention is given to it. So, that's the important piece. It's just consistent attention year over year, working towards greater accessibility. That's how you make the changes.
Yeah, and just briefly, a lot of information late at night, but it is important and helpful, I think, both for myself and I'm sure people who are watching or listening at home as well. It sounds like, people could be skeptical. There's so much data that they'd be like, so much data, how is this going to ever translate into a physical change on the ground? And it sounds like your answer is really, well, look, there's so much. The only way you're going to make progress on the physical changes we need is with some sort of systemic culture change in the organization. And if you don't start there, you're just not going to see those physical improvements. I don't know if I'm misinterpreting what you're saying.
The answer is all of the above. You need to have the programmatic access review change. You need to have the policy. You need to have the culture change. You also, at the same time, need to be working on some of the physical barriers that have been assessed. So within the plan, we do have a suggested schedule for right-of-way maintenance. Focusing on which barriers you should be remediating first in the early years. Focusing on some that are of greater issue from a prioritization perspective. So, for instance, if you have a curb ramp around City Hall that is non-compliant, it's something you want to work on earlier than maybe a curb ramp in an area where there's lower pedestrian foot traffic and it's not directly tying to an important city function. So information like that is within the plan. So the key is to work that part of the plan, but at the same time be focusing on that larger culture change that we've mentioned a few times.
Okay, so any other questions or comments on this?
I want to tell Mr. Rudisill that I appreciate all your efforts on this.
Yeah,
there's been a lot
of input.
Flack from the side, but I'm confident this is a good plan. As they say, no plan survives first contact with the enemy. That's especially true when it comes to curb cuts. I've put in those myself. So I think, the city manager's made it clear that he expects a culture of compliance with this, and we do too. And, it also sounds like that, I think it's a solid plan, and I appreciate the effort that's gone into it.
So can I get a motion to adopt this?
So is it's to endorse it? Is that
To
it?
endorse it, not to adopt it.
Second I move that we endorse the 2025 ADA transition plan update.
Second?
Second, can we vote? Oh,
I just wanted to say, I think it's important that we understand that this is not a final version of a document. And it's not a plan in the sense that we don't have a plan from the city manager of implementing it. And a lot of the questions and concerns that people have been about implementation. I sent along an email earlier today listing some of those concerns. And I hope that, Mr. City Manager, we can get some real discussion of work plans from all these different departments to say how you're going to implement all this stuff. Because I think what you've done is, and it's exhaustive, and to a certain extent exhausting, and that's good. But obviously how we choose to winnow through it and what we choose to act on first is where the real issue is. So I'm happy to endorse it as a great start on the effort that we all need to take and give Mr. Urtasun a little something to do in his spare time.
Thank you so much.
But I have confidence that we'll be able to get this thing done. Thank you.
Thank you very much. We have a, thank you. Thank you, appreciate you.
Thank you so much.
We have an item from the consent agenda, item 11, that was on the Dogwood Memorial. So, you had some questions, I guess? Natalie?
We've gone over it. I think my position's clear that I think there's a better solution to this, so I just didn't want to vote yes on it with the entire rest of everything that I was okay with, so.
Okay.
So I move the resolution to allocate $100,000 to the Dogwood Vietnam Memorial Foundation of Virginia and $4,260.65 to the CIP contingency fund.
Second.
Okay, can we vote? Motion passes 4-1. And now we're at the point on the agenda for the second community matters. Anyone in the audience like to speak?
One member of the public.
Yeah, like to speak? Oh, yes, sir.
I promise I'll be fast.
No?
You've got 3 minutes.
Yeah.
I don't need all that. I know that most of the time when I'm up here, and really when most of the public is up here, we're mad at y'all about something or other. I've watched a lot of tape. I know that it's a pretty thankless job, so I figured that I would give my thanks to y'all about something. The e-bike voucher program is incredible and genuinely life-changing. My wonderful girlfriend, who I live with, just won in the second raffle drawing from a couple weeks ago, and we just a couple days ago we got our e-bike from Blue Ridge Cyclery. We live in Cabell Avenue. It's a food desert. The closest grocery store was Reed's, rest in peace. And even then, it wasn't really within walking distance. As a result, I think like 90% of our car trips were to drive to Barracks to get 1 or 2 grocery bags worth of stuff, and we always hated that. We hate driving, but we didn't have the money to get a $1,300 e-bike, but now we do, and we're about to get a basket attachment so that we can run groceries with it, and our morning commute is so much faster, and so I just really unequivocally I wanted to say that I'm so appreciative. This program has made our lives way better, literally just in the week since we've had this bike, and I really think that it's improving the community, getting cars off of the road, so thank you. You see so much of government making lives worse these days, so it's really nice to see it make something better. I'll let you go home. Thank you.
Oh,
Thanks, Mo. I didn't even pay him to say that.
Yeah. If there's no other business, is there a motion to adjourn?
So moved.
So moved.
Second.
Thank you.
No discussion.
So here's.
Which kind did you get?
So have